topic one. Over the weekend, the island nation of Haiti was hit by an earthquake that has killed at least 1,200 people, and that number is very likely to rise. This follows another devastating earthquake the nation suffered a decade ago, after which nations around the world promised aid. However, much of that was never delivered, and the damage of that previous disaster was never repaired. Do you think that foreign aid is, in a sense, performative? Can NGOs be trusted with managing aid funds, or should we give it to governments with a history of corruption and hope for the best? All right, so yeah, Haiti, like it's been superseded by the other story, and we'll talk about that in our second topic. But yeah, there's been a massive, massive tragedy over in Haiti, so our brothers and sisters there are hurting. But there's lots of promises. Promises made, previously, of assistance, promises made this time, but last time a lot of that aid did not show up, or when it did show up, those NGOs stole that money and just didn't distribute it or used it in terrible ways, right? So I'm just trying to get down. So we're just using Haiti as a jumping off point. But do you think that that aid in itself is something that nations simply say they'll do, for, I guess, honestly, PR purposes, or do you think that there's something actually behind this will to help? Like, yeah, what are your general thoughts on all this? But thank you so much. All right, so let's just your gambit. We'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's both. I think our country likes to help other countries. I do think we also like, being in the spotlight and being able to do that. But I don't think that necessarily undermines the sentiment that we want to help these countries that are in need. So I'm in favor of us giving support in situations like this because there's like real people suffering, right? Like I looked at some of the videos and it's like hard to look at because they're like rescuing people from underneath rubble and things like that. So there's obviously a need. So I think the fact that people are giving to help that situation is a good thing. Now, when it comes to NGOs or corrupt governments or anything, there are going to be people that unfortunately are evil and they'll use this as an advantage to enrich themselves. I was watching something that said even there were gangs that were blocking some roadways and all kind of crazy stuff. So, unfortunately, because there is a need, there's also going to be people who see a reason to take advantage of the need that exists and be selfish for themselves. I don't think that we should stop giving because people like that exist. I think we have to maybe look at patterns of engagement and distribution and try to find better and better people to collaborate with. But in general, I'm in favor of giving to people that are in need. But I'm ready to hear what everybody else has to say. Wait,
Hmm?
am I muted?
No,
Prime's muted.
you're good.
Oh, Prime's muted. Oh,
No, sorry. Fuck, I got a lot of background noise here. And I'll have to keep muting because it's not going to stop. But CTV walked away. We're gonna go to counterpoints.
Yeah, so what I would say is I think NGOs actually can be tracked through their like trustworthiness and all that kind of stuff. I think there are like research databases for which charities actually do a good job of fulfilling their mission. Obviously, we need that kind of transparency in order to know where money goes. I do not think that giving money to kleptocratic regimes is an option. We can see that with Afghanistan. We basically did $50 billion a year for 20 years to the country of Afghanistan in security assistance, and we have nothing to show for it. So no, I think NGOs are the flawed but better way to go. We should have a public accountability and transparency system. We should hold people criminally and socially accountable for if they're defrauding charities. And then also I have a hotter take on, Haitian American relations once we get into the general. So.
Maddy?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. One example of the way that NGOs are eroding trust that a lot of people have in them to actually use funding appropriately is, believe it or not, the Red Cross. So during the last major earthquake in Haiti, the Red Cross raised over $500 million to help rebuild communities in Haiti, including, people's homes were destroyed, their businesses were destroyed, entire cities were leveled. And they raised all this money only to see barely any of it actually used. In fact, there's still devastation from earthquakes that happened years ago. And the question then becomes, well, what the hell happened to everything that was fundraised? And the unfortunate reality is a lot of these NGOs, whether it's because of too many administrative costs or operating costs, or the fact that they operate remotely, they don't necessarily have folks on the ground there embedded within the communities. A lot of that fundraising goes to waste and doesn't actually go towards helping the people they allege that it will. And Connor's right. There are resources out there that allow you to see which NGOs and charities, like what percentage is actually spent in direct aid, to better inform your decisions when you're thinking about who to donate. But also, what I've sort of started to do more often is I look for locally based community organizations and try to prioritize donating my money there, because I, at least from my own personal opinion, these like larger NGOs have just done a lot to make me pretty distrustful, and I think a lot of other people agree.
CTV, you're back. Your opinion.
Well, when it comes to foreign aid and NGOs, the problem that you're going to run into is there's no way for you to be able to pass a law in order to do this thing, because in reality, right, private corporations doing something beyond the borders of the United States can't be done that way. So the only two ways that you can go about this is either A, to, be okay with private organizations like the Clinton Foundation, right? Donating their money or saying they're going to donate money to a cause, and then somehow take advantage of it. That, or you need to be collecting tax dollars and then tell the government to go over there and do a thing, right? Well, then you get into that other conversation about governments being involved in land that is not their own. So topics 1 and 2 are pretty closely tied together in this kind of regard, because it is foreign policy, right? So I would like to have everybody kind of think about it and answer the question, what's the more permanent solution moving forward, given the state of the world today with regard to the United States' place and it actually helping situations rather than either being, in some views, too hands-on and in other views too hands-off. So what's the solution or the balance to the foreign policy? Because frankly, I think that it's been failing for a while.
The solution to foreign policy. We will get right on that, CTV. We're going to cook that up, knock it out in a few minutes.
Or you could just ask a question and I'll let you know.
But just messing around with you. But thank you for that. Yep. Let's go to Ninetales.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer. First of all, I'm not a big fan of world building or like going into a place to like make it your own. So like, don't extend this further than I'm saying it. But if you're a country and you have the resources to help, then, get off your privileged ass and help. That being said, this is a sliding scale. Like, aid only matters if you're actually giving it to the people. So we only should be I really do think America, or Canada for that instance, should be doing whatever it can to make sure that if people pay for something, they get what they want. And I don't care, let's say hypothetically, I actually very highly doubt this, that the U.S. cannot prosecute entities from its own domain for what it does around the world. Let's say that that's true. That should be motherfucking changed, because we do not need We do not need groups like this screwing over countries for the sake of profits. That's just going to make the world an ugly, terrible place. And then we wonder why these countries end up hating us.
Let's go with T-Jump.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what Counterpoint said. I think that NGOs are not good. They're definitely corrupt, but they're more efficient than the other methods we have. But I'd honestly think that China's very corrupt method of just giving donations in large sums seems to work the best at building economies of scale in other countries. Even though they're very evil at it, I think their method is actually better than any of the ones we use right now, which is why they're using the China Belt and Road Initiative, making it so successful. So I'd probably copy them in some respect.
Okay. Marcy's gone. Oh, God. All right. Well, open panel then. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so here's one area where I actually tend to agree with people who are saying, like, NGOs bad, whatever. I do think that cash payments directly, like when you look at the like macroeconomics of, if we're just thinking about like economic aid versus like disaster aid when something actually has happened, I think that does tend to generate the best outcomes, just because you're eliminating that middleman, so that the likelihood that that money is then infused back into that market and benefits the local community, it's just a lot higher. The problem with this, and I think this touches on Afghanistan a little bit more, but the problem is that if you're just like directly giving to a government and then that money is not used to like be injected back into the community and goes to foreign contractors, because they like even on the ground in a lot of these areas will still contract American companies, even though we donated a bunch of money to the government. It kind of comes with that wink and a nod of like, okay, you'll get this money, but a certain amount of it has to go to our buddies who have these businesses. And I don't know, it just like that sort of aid, on the whole, I think, yeah, we should just have straight donations, giving to governments. However, like when you're dealing with corrupt governments, it just makes things a little tricky.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So the thing that I wanted to kind of say is that like we have a unique relationship with the Caribbean, in that they're within our sphere of influence. What I mean by that is that I want to say the Monroe Doctrine, but my history is a little rusty. Basically saying that like we will not allow European intercession within the Americas, and we're going to take primacy and all that kind of stuff. Well, with that primacy comes a certain level of responsibility. Haiti is a really interesting example of pretty fucked up colonialism. Not only was there slavery and then a slave revolt, but then on top of that, the French colonial system went so far as to, when they ultimately kind of knew that they had to give up the territory, they went so far as to cut all of the viable timber from the Haitian side of the island that they actually owned, to the point that soil erosion is literally worse in Haiti than it is in God damn it, the Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic.
Yeah. So basically, like at this point, this is just going to continue to be a problem. Obviously, we have like corruption, infrastructure issues, all that kind of stuff. So we either need to make an investment, or we need to allow a fast track visa program for people who are coming from the country of Haiti. Because if there's anything kind of similar to what happens in Central and South America, people come to the United States for work, they send money home, then slowly things get better at home. So that was kind of my hot take is regionally, it's our responsibility. We can't just keep waiting for Haiti to have like all these like random disasters in order to say, oh, we care about Haiti now. We probably need a more intelligent and long-term policy if we don't want to see this continuing for the next century, especially with global warming on the horizon.
I'd go much farther than you, right? Because I think you're leaving America's role off the table. And I wanted to give CTV credit, though I'm not sure if you can hear us or not. CTV credit.
He's talking to his dog.
Calling out the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation, the Clintons have been the enemy when it comes to Haiti. And so and they've had, and not just them, but like it goes back since like the Revolution, since fucking Thomas Jefferson. I wrote a letter about how much he can't stand Haiti because there's slaves who actually revolted, and the U.S. has had constant interference in the country, constant interference, right? So let's not put this on other nations, right? Like the reason why Haiti is where it is because U.S. Specifically U.S. interference.
Yeah, well, you could say that about so many Central and South American countries, is that we like to sort of say, you know, oh, well, you can't just come here because your country's a mess, and that's how could you possibly support a corrupt dictator? But the reality is, a lot of those dictators came to power, and those governments in general amassed power because they were completely destabilized due to U.S. interests going in, and then the current regime at that time not playing ball to advance American interests. So like there is a long sordid history of the United States meddling, which is also like admittedly why for a lot of those countries, even when they're in a state of like natural disaster, oftentimes their communities are weary of taking any sort of just like massive foreign investment because not even that far back in their histories, the United States came in with foreign aid under the guise of it being benevolent and altruistic, and then having it really just being a way for them to advance our own corporate interests. So it just makes it difficult. That's why I tend to look more towards community-based programs. So not necessarily the large like international corporations, but like, I mean, we have the internet now, right? Do research on what nonprofits and community programs are operating within the country, and funnel the money to those people because it's locally owned. They're people that, you know, every dollar that you give towards those organizations are going to go back into that community, help people rebuild, help redo infrastructure. In Haiti, I think Counterpoints mentioned this, which is it's so true. I mean, look at any satellite image of that island, and you can see right down the middle where the divide is between the Dominican Republic and Haiti because of the just over like not using best practices for agriculture in Haiti. And so trying to like help these people get back on their feet, especially when we played such a role in their destabilization.
I'm a little bit more evil than everybody else on the panel, I guess. So my perspective would be that like
that's a hell of a thing to claim.
Well, I mean, it's just
CTV's like, first of all,
it's just true, isn't it? So the thing about it is like I always view domestic economies, regardless of their origin or whatever. I view them through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I've talked about in the before, where basically it's like from a human psychological standpoint, you have to meet basic physical needs, then you meet security, then you meet social needs, and then you meet egotistical needs. I tie social needs and egotistical needs within the economy. I don't think that you can have a economy until you have security or basic needs met. But I also see these things as like self-fulfilling cycles. So while I do understand the wariness of like American investment and American corporations intervening, what I would say is that this isn't the 19th century anymore, or at least I hope it's not. I hope we're, well, hold on. All right. I need to take this back because wasn't Coca-Cola literally killing people in the 1980s?
Hey,
yeah.
don't worry.
In
Don't
the
worry
90s.
All right, fuck it. You're right. We're all bad. I'm sorry.
Counterpoints. I don't want you to worry, man. Right? Like we had this Mayan calendar for a while. We were definitely not still in the 19th century. Okay.
And this is why I love counterpoints on these things, man. Counterpoints just came to a conclusion in real time. You just watched him flip. It was beautiful.
Oh, and now he disappeared.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
there
teleported
is.
away with his.
It looked like he teleported.
It did. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the CIA interrupting my fucking newsfeed because they were like, "Oh, shh, we were doing that in the 80s. Shut the fuck up." And I was
That's
like,
true. They were like, abort, get him.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be the conservative.
That was
Okay.
actually like my right ear is you guys, my left ear is the CIA. So no, I I do think that there is potentially
Saw
such
the
thing as
laser
like,
pointer.
yeah,
I
yeah,
never
yeah.
see you
That's
at
what
any of
happened.
the meetings.
So but I do think there is such a thing as like positive capital investment, positive mixed economy capitalism, positive infrastructure and development. One of the challenges, so I've actually been to the Dominican Republic. I actually worked in kind of like building houses over there. One of the things that I found challenging is like it didn't seem like there was much room for an economy besides tourism because of the population density. And also because of just the way the city was kind of laid out. But that's kind of my thing. So for instance, like I kind of want to ask this question to the panel, especially to the leftists.
Sure.
My solution is let the corporations in, let them train a new generation of workers, and then allow that to raise up the economy. How do you take a place that has like few natural resources besides tourism and turn it into something that's like self-perpetuating?
Wait, so we
And-
just let the profit model decide who gets help?
Well,
No,
what I was going to say is like,
but-
it's a perfect
sorry, go ahead.
analogy sitting right next door in Cuba. Like, they're both
Okay.
like very, very similar, like in every imaginable way. They're like only a few miles apart. You know what I mean? And like on the one hand, like you've got Cuba doing what Cuba's doing, which is like barely surviving, but doing so in like an organized way where everybody has healthcare, everybody has a place to live, and everybody's fed. And like, and then in Haiti, you've got the capitalist system where the place is literally run by like narco cartels and like and is like abject poverty everywhere. So. Like, I think that there's a bunch of ways that we can make critique about the way that Haiti's managed its money and its government.
But okay, so for instance, I kind of heard like that the option is between like a poor but socialistic system that does take care of people, or like a kleptocratic capitalist system with like horrific poverty and wealth disparity. My
Right.
question though is more like from a socialistic lens or whatever. The whole point is to, like, I guess, redistribute profit and well-being and all that kind of stuff in the most egalitarian way possible. What I'm asking is, how do you grow the pie of the thing that you distribute in these kinds of countries? That's my question, regardless of how the materials or economics are distributed.
I mean, let Maddie take it because I don't want to talk too much, but I got something to say about that if she doesn't.
Yeah, no worries. I was going to say my question for that I'd be looking at, well, what are our goals? Because if we're giving aid with just sort of like blanket whatever, like we're just going to give you X amount of money without some sort of goal, or like, okay, well, here's the desired outcome that would hopefully come from this amount, then we can't go in blind doing that. So if the overall goal for that influx of capital is, we envision this going towards infrastructure, or we envision this, or the best way to have this utilized is to invest in locally owned businesses and stimulate like the local community, and that would be something where we could be like, okay, now we can look at how we achieve that and where we measure success from. But I think painting it with broad strokes without first looking at the individual goals in each of these countries for why we're spending that, then it's sort of impossible to like detail out an ideal scenario, because we don't know what we're working towards.
Yeah.
Can I respond to counterpoints real quick?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the problem is that basic needs, especially the things you need to make the underpinnings of an economy. Sorry if I'm not talking close enough to my mic. These goods are often like very rarely excludable and rivalrous, meaning they're very rarely things that only one person can use at a time, and they're very rarely things that should only be accessible through money, especially from a leftist point of view. Private companies and corporations, stuff like that, are better suited for dealing with private goods. What we're talking about is public goods, which I think should be handled by not the state, but like should be handled by whoever already has the means to do so.
Sure. Okay. So my follow-up question, because again, like I don't really care if Haiti is socialist or whatever. So let's say that we said we're giving a whole generation of Haitians food. They have food, and they have whatever shelter that they have right now, right? But there's a goal where we want to kickstart the Haitian economy, the Haitian culture, try to make it like an independent country and all that kind of stuff. What, like for me, like some of the things are obvious. We live in a consumer economy. I already know there's like textile manufacturers down in Haiti. I already know there's a few. I think Reebok is down there actually. But my point being that like there has to be something there, some kind of domestic industry besides tourism to support a population that large.
So I think part of the problem here is, so I wasn't sure about your claim that Haiti has no natural resources, but like I have to look that up right now and just looking into it. It produces a lot of agriculture that's used in various other nations. But even if that's the case, there are plenty of other countries that don't have natural resources, right? What you have there is actual industry, as we were just alluding to. That's what you need. Like, you need to be able to take raw resources, right? Not just produce them, but actually create something with them, because that's where the money is, right? So in any case, like, you always, like, for not just Haiti, but for so many other poor nations, right? Their resources are extracted, taken somewhere else, right? Turned into a profit. I read Haiti's #1 source of this certain type of root, and it's used within like perfumes, like expensive perfumes, right? Like, why aren't those perfumes being made there, right? And then exported out? It's like, what was it, the Swiss being known for like chocolate, but not actually producing that chocolate. That chocolate comes from somewhere else, but they can create the final product and ship it out, and then they get all the credit. Everyone knows, oh wow, the Swiss are so great at all this chocolate. Where does that come from, right? And why aren't those other countries doing it? And that's where the money always comes from. It's from industries, and those industries don't get the support. When these foreign countries try to create their own industry, there's interference, right? Because then it'll interfere with the import and the export. Because like, why it will be competing with those foreign industries. So I think that's the real problem, is that these places don't have that. And if we're actually serious about that, we'd help foster it. But I don't think we've ever actually been serious about helping Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what I was. Oh,
Go for it,
sorry. I
Nigel.
was trying to continue the back and forth, but maybe we should move on.
No,
Well, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
What I would say, if you don't have anything to add, is that like education is the key. Like, bottom line is that like Haiti doesn't have much industry. They take like 70% of their economy is imported. They are basically like dependent on doing trade with the United States, like we're like essentially most of the stuff that's brought into their country. And so like what we need to do, or like what needs to happen, I would say, is probably like education and retooling, and like getting people ready for like working in like cyberspace and cyber like careers, whether it's like, you know, software, like whatever it is. And like the facts are that like those things can be anywhere, and like that's part of the attraction to it, right? And it doesn't require like actual natural resources or exploitation of the earth in order to get those things up and running. So like the key parts are going to be high-speed internet, having good access to it, and like and getting the infrastructure for that later, and also having like reliable like electricity. So like doing those things would probably put them in pretty good condition to like try to like turn the corner into like, you know, like the 2020s and like beyond, and have a growing economy again. The biggest problem that they are like facing obviously at the moment is infrastructure. Like so now is a great opportunity. Like we've got all these technologies, all these things that we want to try as far as you know, like green energy is concerned. This is a great test case. Like for, you know, like here's an entire market that's an isolated area that we can go in, and like they need everything. So like let's go give them everything. Let's try it out. Let's try all this battery storage things that we've been talking about for energy storage overnight. And
we're just gonna create a bunch of super fun sites there.
How often do they have
Super
events
fun
that
sites
would
by
tear
making
that
the fucking-
infrastructure up, though?
What's
Right?
that?
So how often do they have events that would ruin that infrastructure?
Well, that's
though?
the point, though. It's like they shouldn't be being ruined.
You would want to, you would want to
there's
weatherproof
actually a great
it.
example. There's a great example of an island nation that deals with just as many, if not more, earthquakes all the time, and big earthquakes, but has like built an infrastructure that for the most part can withstand that kind of disaster, and that's Japan. Like they have, my dad used to go when I was really, really young, before he went on disability. He used to travel back and forth to Japan at least like 4 or 5 times a year. And he said it was like just about every other time he was there, they had some sort of earthquake. So it's like, I think if we want to look for how infrastructure has been built out to like modernize a country, especially a country that like, I mean, if we're looking at something like a Japan, or even like parts of Europe, they were devastated post World War II, and then were able to build up their infrastructure, have the United States be partners with them in their economic development, and then are now in a place where they're thriving. I think we need to maybe just look at success stories and case studies of what this has looked like in practice before, that gives us a bit of a blueprint of what it can look like for countries like Haiti.
Yeah,
Can I just say how jealous of your dad that I am?
Hold on. Do you think Japan is a success story? How did Japan get in the position that it was?
I'd say they're doing better than they were.
I mean, it's important to.
Since 1945, they've kind of done a lot, buddy.
I mean,
okay, well, CTV, don't just virtue signal that they're
That's
not.
exactly the point, right? Like, Jesus fucking Christ! If I'm just gonna start talking, everybody's just gonna start and just then why the fuck?
Sorry,
exactly. Well, I'm just fucking saying, right? It's important to bring up history. The reason why Japan is as well equipped to deal with earthquakes as it is because they've been dealing with it for a long fucking time. The peoples that have been there, right? That's why when you look at like Japanese architecture, especially their old architecture made out of wood, oh my God, that is some of the best architecture you will see, bar none. But it has a lot to do with what they've been dealing with as the peoples living on this particular island for, a fucking millennia or better. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, like, I wouldn't say that like the success that they've had since the ultimate surrender that they had to make at the end of World War II, right? When the United States has been there and helping them along, that's going to be an inherently different situation than what you're going to be able to present to other peoples around the world, unless you're planning on there being another ultimate surrender situation, right?
Well, hold on.
Wait, so what do you think's been happening in Haiti this whole time?
Sorry, Connor, go for it. I'm sorry.
Please, God. Okay. The point is that like somebody was bringing up like weatherproofing or catastrophe proofing infrastructure as like a necessary part of what you would have to do in Haiti, and that would be a barrier to entry. No, we would want this kind of stuff anyways. So it basically talking about if we're talking about basically I'll be weird about it, if climate change is real, I know that'll trigger the fuck out of a bunch of lefties, but seriously, if agriculture is going to be a problem, if not earthquakes, but if agriculture is going to be a problem, if storms are going to be a problem, if hurricanes are going to be a problem, these are things that we need to weatherproof against. These are things that we need to plan for. So a test case in an area that has earthquakes and hurricanes is actually kind of ideal for testing out new infrastructure to see how resilient it is. So
okay. Can I just ask you though, if corporations are inherently invested in infrastructure, why don't logging companies in the States fix like the roads that they travel on? Why do they constantly let them go to shit and then only come around to fix it when the road is gone?
We don't have private infrastructure generally. Not in a broad way in this country.
And they also want to externalize that cost. Sense. Well, they also want to externalize the cost to the taxpayer, and they also want to basically minimize any of their liabilities whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that there isn't.
Aren't they going to be incentivized to do that in Haiti too?
Oh, 100%. But if you were talking about like very specifically like green energy infrastructure or something like that, then there would be a reason to test out your product so you could scale it up into other models.
Right.
Well, what would be the point in like spending all of your money in another country that you're probably not going to get very much profit from? Like, do you really think companies or countries are going to
like government supplement?
That's what Elon Musk tried to do, right? Y'all support Elon Musk. This is great.
What are you talking about, Jesse?
I think me personally, if we're going to have
energy problem, I can't remember exactly which country, right? This is exactly what he did. He took his product for solar energy to. Damn, I wish I knew which country. I usually would know this off the top of my head, but yeah, that's exactly what Elon Musk did.
Well, if you
we definitely want.
It's also gone like full renewable energy. Costa Rica now generates 100% of their total energy off of sustainable means, and so that's like again another country in the region that uses their natural resources and the technology available to them to build out a grid that is sustainable, that can withstand the like natural elements. Like this is something that can be replicated, but I think to everyone else's point where we're talking about, well, what is private corporations' role in that? It's tricky because while they have tons of resources and technology that could be brought to that country and then used to help the country sort of like catch up in terms of like economic development, the issue is that for a lot of those companies, that also just means exporting wealth out. And like,
yeah. Can I just say though, like talk to me once Elon actually gives them the infrastructure to build their own Tesla batteries, okay?
But we don't.
I can't
so-
wait for Elon to
can
invent
I-
this
so-
company again.
So we'll go to Connor and then Revolt. I'm sure you have something to say, so I really want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to address T-Jump's skepticism because he's like, why the fuck would you invest in these countries anyways if you're not going to be returning a profit margin? And on top of that, you could pilot it in countries in which you expect a profit margin. I understand that. But the thing that I'm kind of trying to stare the barrel down whenever I talk to liberals and progressives about climate change is like, it's supposed to be either apocalyptic or literally kill millions of people. That's like the outcome that a lot of people on the left are expecting out of climate change. If that's true, if that's real, then basically we have to completely rethink the way that we do infrastructure, not just in the United States, but in the developing world as well. So I'm trying to bring like previous conversations into this conversation where basically like if we're talking about like, oh, the United States should go nuclear and quick turn natural gas and research carbon capture and this, that, the other, that's cool if we do it. But then if a whole bunch of developing nations or whatever aren't following suit, then we're kind of fucking ourselves long term anyways. So that's kind of my mindset of why you would invest in countries that you wouldn't typically see a profit out of.
That's not really the case. First of all, less developed nations pollute far less and contribute far less to climate change. They receive far more of the impacts than what they do for what they contribute. Secondly, if you're trying to prepare for infrastructure or problems here, then what does there actually provide? Earthquakes? Well, actually, earthquakes aren't going to increase with climate change, so that doesn't actually prepare you for anything.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
They frequently have earthquakes, and they also have hurricanes like on a regular basis, and they're getting worse. And it's also a really hot climate that's like really moist and like full of salt water.
Yeah,
and, the most
I'm just saying,
like destructive.
I'm just saying that that's the case for the U.S. too, minus the earthquake. So why don't they just do all that development in the U.S.?
West Coast,
California would like a word.
Bang!
Because they need it right now.
So like I think that the solution is pretty simple here, right?
Down.
Especially when it comes to Haiti or any of the countries that typically get fucking hit with hurricanes every year, right? Which, you know, being down here in Florida, I know me and Counterpoints are definitely keeping an eye on the fucking weather, right? So all that said, one of the things that could be done in order to help these countries that deal with this shit every year, rather than just trying to pump tax dollars into their government, which then you got to kind of trust their governments whether or not they're going to do the right thing by the money and actually fix shit for the people. What could happen is having the CBs, right, or construction battalions that are in the Navy, right, you know, having ships in the area during those seasons, or at least within like, you know, a week, you know, out max during this time of year, having them to be able to go in there and say repair fucking roads, build new fucking roads, right? Go in there and fucking dig up the fucking ground, put in underground cabling, which I'm sure they probably already don't have any fucking power poles. If they did, that'd be absolutely insane, right? So like the things that help with infrastructure as far as getting the ball rolling on these things, like if there's materials on the island to be able to fucking build the roads, then let's fucking build the fucking roads and help out in that way, so then business can carry on as usual. But if we're doing anything beyond that, all we're really doing is trusting government officials to not be corrupt, as in, say, I don't know, the Clinton Foundation, right?
We don't have to do business with the Clinton Foundation. Like, we can elect people that don't do business with the Clinton Foundation, and we probably like prescriptively should do that. But like what you're saying though, like, I mean, like, here's the thing: they need the infrastructure. They need all the bells and the whistles and all the stuff that you kind of like left off as being like, oh well, we don't have to go that far. You know, it's like they need roads and they need everything else. So like, why wouldn't we take the opportunity to like, you know, like fund the research and development of the things that we know that we're going to need too, that we don't have yet. We haven't practiced it yet. We haven't seen large scale implementations yet, or medium scale implementations in this case. And it'd be a good test for, you know, representative of what a United States like demographic or a like a geographic area would be, you know.
Yeah, and
I don't think Haiti needs a Walmart there to like crush out small businesses before they can even develop.
I don't want to give them.
I know. I'm not. That's not just to you,
nukes.
Revolt. I'm responding to like Connor as well.
Well, yeah. So I want to address this because I'm hoping Maddie and I had the same idea simultaneously, although I'm going to make it evil again by the end of it. So basically, no, like when we're talking about shifting to green energy, shifting to electric vehicles, all that kind of stuff, what we're really talking about is we're talking about trying to redo the entire electric grid, because a decent chunk of it is reliant on like natural gas and coal right now. And nukes are really the way to go, as far as I can tell, for like a baseline of power. But at the same time, there's concerns with that. There's not in my backyard, NIMBY folks who really don't want nukes in their backyard. And there's also
about Haiti still, or did this shift
yes.
to America?
Oh my God, I'll get there. CTV, chill. So fucking the reason
I
why
just wouldn't want to put a reactor on Haiti.
Well, right, okay, but the reason why you don't want to put a reactor on Haiti is because it gets hit by hurricanes and because it gets hit by earthquakes. Well, you were saying that earthquakes are not a concern with climate change. Well, what is a concern is providing reliable power to California, which is a place that routinely experiences earthquakes. So you have to design nuclear power plants that are rugged enough and have enough redundant safety measures that even if the entire plant was basically ripped apart by I don't know, whatever 6 or 7 Richter scale earthquake, it doesn't matter because you have those built-in safety measures.
Is there any active volcanoes on that island? I'm not sure.
I don't know. It is an island.
I thought our plan was to let.
Well, I mean, if there are, then the most obvious way to get power would be geothermal.
Well, okay, so here's I want to get down to brass tacks though, because this is what we're talking about. If we're not talking about investing in the Caribbean in order to make those places sustainable into the next few centuries, if we're talking about global warming and climate change being real and affecting people, what we're talking about is mass immigration from Caribbean and Central American nations into North and South America. That's what we're talking about. So we either invest or we have mass immigration. Those are the two options.
I mean, if your investment amounts to world building, then I'm not for it.
So, Revolt Rise, I want to understand what you've had something you wanted to share about Haiti, so I want to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, like Haiti is just a perfect example of the. Again, I've said this before, and I'm going to recap it just one last time. Like they have a clean, blank slate right now. Like honestly, like what they had for infrastructure sucked anyway, and it was due for replacement in like major sections, except for what's been, like some of it has been replaced as it gets storms over the years. But the facts are is that they just got hit by an earthquake. They've got this major situation, unrest that's been happening, and there's like a bunch of damage to all their like structures anyways, and it's about to be hurricane season, and so like now is a perfect time to like go in there and like actually build out the system the way that it should be so that they can have an economy. And we need to be thinking about it in terms of like 100 years like of use, because if you think about the United States, like as a perfect example, during the New Deal, we built the bridges and the roads and the infrastructure, the electrification infrastructure that we're still using today, like to this day, and it's time for replacement, and like nobody wants to do that here. So like let's think about it the same way there. If we give them that opportunity, I think there's like absolutely no reason why they couldn't be like a thriving nation and they, become like, a good strategic partner for the United States as well. There's specialization of things that can exist there that won't exist at other places because of like what is available for natural resources, and like efficient like distribution of that like should be enough to fund all the things I'm talking about. But really, it's a good example of something in our region that we have control over, and that like we can like test out some of these new technologies that we need to start implementing in the United States.
Based.
So, I there's so much that that country and like Haiti always seems to be like a test case for like neoliberalism. Like, what can we do to these people? I mean, just centuries of interference and actively, I mean, like the U.S. invaded the country multiple times. Like it had it was some sort of military record, one of those records the American military has as to how long we fucked over this one particular country.
It was the first place they ever sent our Marines, right?
Yeah, something like that. We sent our Marines there, and they stayed there for a ridiculous amount of time. I wish I had the number on me. But they stayed there.
And back again.
What'd you say?
And then Hillary Clinton just sent them back again, like to hold off the Musai's after his election. Basically, like they delayed it by a year before he's sworn in. So
the Marines come, the U.S. Marines come. They invade. They oppress the people. They try to suppress them. They torture individuals. And destroy the morale of the people there. Like for instance, there was one freedom fighter that they kidnapped, and they took him up. They tortured and killed him. They tied him to a door. I don't know why they tied him to a door. It's weird. But anyway, they took a picture of him and then distributed
too many Rambo movies.
that's weird. Yeah, I don't know. But they distribute it over the island, right, to break the spirit of the revolutionaries who have been fighting back against the Americans. They also went to a place called Lakai, where they was a slaughter. Marines opened fire on civilians. That's a slaughter. That's where I get my name from. PrimeCayes. It's from that town. That town was also hit by this earthquake. It's Haiti is just an example of like the worst things that an imperial nation can do to another, right? One that can't fight back, and it always happens every time. And then we say that we care, that we'll do better, right? But no American president, right? None of them, don't care what color they are. No American president has done better. Hillary Clinton, under fucking President Barack Obama as Secretary of State, went there and actively interfered with their election. They actively installed their prime minister. Like, this guy lost the election through the election process. They got a complicated election process, right? This guy didn't make it through. Hillary Clinton goes to the electoral board and says, either put this guy up, right? Put this guy in, or you'll be suffering the consequences. And she has a history of backing it up, because remember, under Bill Clinton, we invaded it as well, right? That was another invasion that we did to this nation. But of course we care. We care. All the U.S. presidents have blood on their hands here.
Well, okay, so this is probably going to segue very neatly into the Afghan conversation as well. So I had a buddy, Teddy Laguerre, served with him. He wasn't even American. He was literally just Haitian, immigrated, got his citizenship while I knew him. And basically what he was saying was that, like, the way that Haiti operates is pretty standard. Basically what happens is they say, hey, there's this poor guy. He's just like you. He's one of the bros. And if you elect him, then he's going to change everything. And then everybody rallies behind that person. And they basically elect him into office. And then what happens is, because that person's poor and comes from a shitty neighborhood and had a rough life and all that kind of stuff, all the rich people just buy him off. And that's what fucking happens over and over and over again. Or he's killed over and over and over again. And then there's some oligarchs that don't want to improve anything. And there's some oligarchs that want to improve things because they actually allegedly care. Now, I don't fucking know, right? I don't know who these people are. I don't know who that prime minister is. I don't know his reputation for corruption. I don't know if, like, he was, like, given head to Hillary Clinton or some shit like that. What I do know is that basically, like, what we have to talk about is, what do we need to do to get people on their feet? Because most of the people in this room were raised, I think, probably in the 80s or 90s, in which we were at least taught to not care about other people's
it's almost like
race
I
or
gave
ethnicity.
that idea.
Yeah. Well, but the point is just like, hopefully we actually care, because we were raised different than our asshole parents. That would be my hope.
No, we keep darting off in all these other different directions, right? But, like, what's something that we could do? Get it to where it's more of a standard practice with the U.S. Navy being in the area to help these islands when they start having hurricanes. Helping get the fucking roads cleared back out, right? There's a lot of fucking construction work out there that these guys could be doing, but instead they're just sitting on the fucking ship, right, cooling out, and they're not doing anything, right? So we're already paying the fucking service members, right? They need, I would say OJT in operating their equipment, and a hurricane coming through and causing mudslides and everything else. Perfect way to get these boys to work. So, like, I don't see the problem here. That's something we could do, right? Nobody's addressed it. Everybody just keeps talking about nuclear energy and, like, all these other things. But in reality, Haiti doesn't need a reactor on it, right? Because of the weather. So geothermal is probably somewhere that, in a direction that I would be wanting to go as far as that's concerned. But the road system, right? The ability to be able to move around the island, right? So that people can get to businesses or people can get to the things that they need. These are the things that help out the most, especially when these kinds of disasters happen.
So you want the military to be in the area perpetually and rebuilding all the roads? That's your suggestion?
I also kind of think we already do this, by the way. Like, a majority of the people in my age group did deploy to Haiti during the last earthquake.
I know they send a lot of reserve, like Army Reserves and others, they often send a lot of those folks to disaster-ridden areas to help with just like rebuilding efforts, just to help with like in general, like organizing all the people who are collectively dealing with the loss of their homes and just like total destruction in a lot of cases of their livelihoods. I think because CTV, I agree. I think it would be helpful to be able to make things like the United States military and other things like that's one thing they do fantastically. That's one thing I love about the organization. What is it? Operation Rubicon. But they use a lot of military vets who have deployed to like disaster-ridden areas, and they use them essentially as like aid workers when there's a hurricane, when there's a tornado. They do a lot of stuff domestically, but also internationally. So using that, I think, to sort of be a response to disasters is good. But in order to get them sustainable or like self-sufficient in terms of economic development, I would say a lot more has to go towards just investing in their overall infrastructure and education system, because that's going to make it so that their citizens can self-actualize and contribute to the economy. But then also restructuring the way we go about lending money or investing in businesses abroad so that the bulk of the wealth that's generated from those businesses isn't just up and extracted. Maybe we need to rethink the way like the World Bank and the IMF structure loans, because as it is right now, a lot of times those just come with other price tags that mean that all the wealth that's generated is extracted, and then the communities just continue to suffer.
Let's go to.
Well, I mean, that's always the.
Oh, finish your point. Finish your point. If you were having background, then it's going to
You know, that's always the point when it comes to lending money. Is it sets in motion a predictable pattern of events that are going to. There eventually will be a downturn because you borrowed money, right? Because you got to pay it back. So, like, the reality here is that since we're discussing NGOs and what their purpose could be in here, it's like it's not. Like, if the NGOs want to be involved, let the NGOs be involved. But we need to have a set of government response with regard to disasters, and with the U.S. Navy and the construction equipment that we already have for them, and them using that is a way for us to, as a nation, right? Yes, we will come in there and help you clear out the roads. The storm knocks some shit over. We'll help you get things back in order. It's your materials, though, right? We're providing equipment and labor, right? So then that's where the NGOs can step in and be like, all right, so fine. You guys are doing the labor and bringing the equipment. We'll buy the materials. Okay, great. So you make sure the materials are sitting there, right? Our guys can pick up and use the materials, and you have a cohesive unit working in that regard. So like there's a way to be able to balance these things, and it's not one or the other, and it's definitely not giving just the government all of the power, and it's not just saying fuck it and only have the NGOs do something, right? There can be a nice balance there, and I think that's kind of where we're at with it.
So I think overall, like on the whole, I agree with that approach. I largely agree. However, one thing I think that's important to consider is that for a lot of these NGOs, in particular, for example, I mean, we talked about the Clinton Foundation, but like the Red Cross is not exactly clean in this regard either. They raised over $300 million for rebuilding efforts in Haiti back during the last earthquake, and hardly any of it was actually spent, because as soon as people stopped focusing on Haiti and like the next natural disaster happened elsewhere, the media moves on. No one was following up, and nothing like happened. And I think of all that money that people who gave, donated with good intent. I think a lot of people that like gave to charity, I certainly gave. I was poor as shit back then, but I like gave $20 thinking like, hey, if this will help, then I want to give. But when your money isn't going somewhere that's actually like going to result in neighborhoods rebuilt, roads repaved, sewer systems and like water and infrastructure and their electrical grid being rebuilt and now fortified to withstand future disasters. Like, I think that's my one problem with NGOs is it on the whole, they're really inefficient. The sole exception. So the one time I spent a couple months in Peru, In between jobs, I volunteered at an orphanage, but I did it through an organization that I selected specifically because they partner with local community-based organizations, and like just all we go in is just ask and say, we'll do whatever you need us to do. We're not here to like tell you what you need. You are in the community and like we're here to help. And that's what really attracted me to it. And it got me rethinking my entire approach to like, well, what constitutes helpful charity, especially when we're thinking foreign aid. So you're right. There is a distinction to be made between like military aid, official US government aid, and then what role NGOs can play and whether or not we trust NGOs to carry out the mission they profess, especially when they fundraise insane amounts of money.
And that's where, like, if the government had its set response of the Navy and Seabees,
I want to go to Nine
then
Tails.
Then the NGOs would have a much more structured way in order to know how to help, and then therefore their efficiency would exponentially increase, and then the public at large would understand better how they're actually helping instead of it being allowed to be in the shadows.
Nine Tails.
Yeah, so a lot to address now. First of all, it's not a clean dichotomy like that. Like, first of all, and like there are Haitian-run NGOs that are strictly Haitian. Those are probably a bit different than global NGOs. So we don't have to break it down to this raw dichotomy of military aid versus NGO aid. Secondly, like, I think that like the biggest problem for corporations has nothing to do with any of this. I think actually Haiti, based on like interviews that I've seen in preparation for this, and the one Haitian friend that I have who I talk to, is like Haiti's full of class consciousness and class conflict, and there's no way the U.S. is going to be able to have its own entity there without like that being heavily criticized, if not like directly opposed by the people of that country. So I think it's not as simple as like infrastructure or like topology or stuff like that. It also comes down to like, do these people even want us here, and how easy is that going to make things?
I think it matters a little bit less. I understand, like, I don't want to like infringe on anybody's sovereignty, but right now they need us. Bottom line is like they need somebody, and they need help, and they need like, if they don't get it, they're not going to be able to continue to survive as a country. So like I want to
agree with you. Yeah, I do agree with you on that. I'm just saying that they might not want it from a U.S. entity on their soil.
I'm happy to find ways to work around that so that we're not imposing things on them. But at the same time, like, I think that this is like the United States necessarily needs to like clean up its image in a really big way. Like, and this would be a really good example of a way to start doing that. And like the other thing too is that like you see the influence that China's been able to garner by instituting their Belt and Road Initiative, right? And like like the United States is falling way behind in terms of like, you know, like diplomacy and foreign policy, like an influence around the world, because we have these like negative like techniques. We have these negative skills that we use all the time in order to like enforce our will. I think that like a positive, like the carrot of like building infrastructure in places like in a you know, like a benevolent way that would benefit everybody, I think is the policy that we obviously need to follow going forward. And doing that in the Caribbean and South America and Central America it would be like undo a lot of past harms that we've been stacking up for centuries.
We don't fund infrastructure here. What makes you think we're going to do it in other countries?
Well, I mean,
hey, now we just passed that infrastructure bill, so
yeah. As soon as it builds some infrastructure, I'll be really excited about it. But
I don't think that undoes any harm, though.
The embarrassment that we're feeling right now, like leaving Afghanistan, is like the perfect fire, like under the ass of getting that project.
I want to jump in on this, but I'll wait till the second topic.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't know. I think we trivialize some of these things, like living in a place that's had 3 hurricanes in the last decade. I mean, three earthquakes like this in the last decade, and the damage it caused. Maybe there are NGOs and people that are actually looking for good solutions. It's just the reality of the situation is far more dire than we're like ascribing to it on this panel.
You can ask the people on the ground. They did actual reporting on this, talking to people who were there, right, and saw the NGOs misuse the money, right? And it's not like there's not like a thing just for.
I'm not saying there wasn't some money that was misused. I'm just saying that it's also possible that these are just really hard problems to live in an area that is
Well,
Well,
you
yeah,
can see that
riddled
like
by
that have been rebuilt to the newer
I mean,
codes are still standing right now. You know,
yeah.
also one of the biggest like influx of volunteers that came to help with the last Haiti earthquake was the fucking Church of Scientology. They like sent people in and like used it as an opportunity to try to convert people to Scientology, and they were like on site offering free what does they call it, personality tests
feet
with
test
their
or whatever.
yeah, exactly. Like, so that's the other
That's
thing
gonna
is
make
like for
them
a
hate
lot of
us.
these
Wasn't
like
it
it
readings? I think isn't it a reading or something?
Yeah, you grab the
or
meter,
maybe that's I don't
E-meter
know.
reading? Yeah. God
E
damn it.
meter,
E-meter,
right? E
right.
meter, that's right. Yeah.
Ugh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Just a lot of grifters when it comes to like like organizations that profess to want to do good, but it's just use human suffering as a means to pad their own wallet and like prey on the good intentions of people who think they're donating to a good cause, who think that the money they're giving is going to like help build houses, and instead it's by giving people fucking e-meter readings, or just like going to bloated administrative costs. So I don't know. I there are a few activists I follow on Twitter who listed out. I need to find the link to where they shared it, but like they shared a bunch, like a couple organizations that they have working relationships with. They say, look, if you're thinking to donate to contribute to um, relief aid in Haiti, there were like one or two organizations that are legit and like local community-based orgs that do a really good job and could use the funds, and literally every single dollar that you donate goes right back into the community.
But there's going to be
So
some other list that says that same place is like corrupt, right? Like there's going to be
yeah, but like
politics
this,
in this too.
but I would trust, so like the only, just, you're right, you're 100% right, but in this case it's because these are activists whose opinion I hold in really high regard and trust. That is why I sort of give them more the benefit of the doubt, because this is something that they work their careers are based on finding and identifying organizations that actually do the work. Like this, that's
Yeah,
their life's work.
yeah, and I mean I'm pro NGOs. Like the reason why I would rather not, like, if a government inside of some place is not like functional, I'd rather not rely on that government. I'd rather rely on empowering NGOs that we find value in. So the sentiment, I definitely agree with, and I think it's the best way. Like, if we have a government that doesn't know how to deal with their problems, and we say we're not gonna funnel money into NGOs, we're gonna only funnel money into the government, it's unlikely that their problems are gonna be addressed, right? So, I mean, I agree with the sentiment 100%.
Well, I think we'll go to Marcy afterwards. I think it's multiple things. One, that these like it doesn't have to be just in one direction, right? So like NGOs, there can be a place for them. I'm just saying that they did not equip themselves well during that last crisis, right? They just didn't. And
sure.
I think these are systemic issues with like lots of causes. So yes, governmental grift, that's a thing. That's like not playing around with. That's a thing that happened. But also on the other end, there was these NGOs that failed, right? And then there were the national governments who said they would deliver and then literally just didn't. Just like the money just never materialized ever, right? So there's systemic failures on all ends. And then there's ones who governments who specifically are antagonistic to Haiti because of its past, right? Haiti having to pay back France, right? The previous colonizer there, for its loss of slaves, or under the threat of violence from France. So yeah, there's been a lot of terrible things that have happened to this nation. A lot of terrible things. It's just more than one thing. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm just blaming the NGOs and that's because that's why everything's not been solved. Like it's going to take more than one step. But I think it's definitely, I like what Maddie said about trusting the people. I will go to Marcy, but first I to thank people who have been gifting that hype train that's happening. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. The people who've been gifting so far, we're at level 3 hype train. If you can help us out and make it to a level for Hype Train, be much appreciated. 0% now, 4.5 minutes left on the clock, 100% left to go. But can we get to a level 4 Hype Train? Thank you so much to people who have been gifting, especially Amanda. Amanda Smash, you've been gifting so much, too much, friend. But thank you so much for helping out this channel and investing in this.
She's such a sweetie.
She's amazing. I keep saying that.
I love her.
But yeah, so help out the Hype Train if you can. It'd be great. Let's go to Marcy.
So I apologize for being absent for so much of that, but this, God, I don't know if this is gonna sound stupid or not. So if it does, all right, just jump down my throat immediately. Could there potentially, hypothetically, be some government insight into the workings of NGOs? Just some oversight, you know? Could there be some way that our government could hold these organizations accountable to actually doing the work that they promise to do in these countries, as opposed to kind of not using NGOs or like just giving the money straight up to the government? I feel like that's kind of a false dichotomy when our government has the ability to create like a wing of itself that can oversee these kind of charitable organizations. I don't know.
Expect them to enforce it when the land's not a part of the government.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if the
Oh,
if the
damn it.
Well, you
company,
can enforce it by not giving to those organizations.
yeah,
in the
that's
future,
well,
right?
that's what I'm saying. I'm
It doesn't
saying that
help
if
you
the
in the
company
now,
is like
though,
but
I
also if
prefer the
company is-
enforcing company isn't the United States, because typically they've used these sort of things to nation build and say, we're not going to give you aid if you don't do what we want. So I'd rather it be like a neutral third party than the states deciding how their aids get spent.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea too. I mean, even if it was something like I don't know how y'all feel about the fucking United Nations, but like even if the United Nations were to do something like that, or I mean, you read at the United Nations, but you know what I mean. Like if there was to be some kind of international agreement to hold charities accountable so that they don't just like line their own pockets with the money, or I mean, that's an extreme example, but just misuse the money.
Pretty sure the United Nations can go away and not too many people will be bothered by it.
I mean, especially when it comes to like disaster relief, right? Or where they're like going under the banner of helping for like a specific thing. Yeah, maybe there could be a bit more oversight. There's already like a certain degree of transparency in terms of looking at where they allocate their funding. They have to file that information so you can see just how much they spend on like overhead and administration versus actual aid. So, I mean, maybe there's a question of drawing some sort of threshold, or for NGOs of a certain size having some sort of like
I just think
So
that it's
as
super
far as like
important
the
for-
UN
I
thing
think it's-
goes,
yeah,
I just want to say really quick, as far as the UN thing goes, I don't think it needs to be the UN. It can be like a third party country who just isn't involved in like the imperialism that the US has been historically involved in.
I mean, that would work too, but my brain immediately is like, well, how do you decide which country? Which is a whole other can of worms. Okay, I'm not here to pitch an exact solution. I'm just saying that I think there's a solution here that doesn't involve completely stopping the use of NGOs or just giving money to any country. And there are some countries where I think during disaster relief it would be appropriate to give money to their government because like we would know that the government would use it wisely, right? But I mean, Haiti, their prime minister just got assassinated. I don't know everything about the situation in Haiti.
I forgot about
that. Yeah, but I know
Holy shit.
there's a lot of fucking political turmoil over there constantly, and a lot of
Right,
it,
right.
yeah, is due to things that the U.S. kind of kickstarted. Whatever. We could talk about that, but I'm just saying, like, there are some countries where I think it's wise to give the money directly to their government, and there are some countries where I think it's less wise. And I think in those countries where it's less wise, NGOs could be a force for good if there was some kind of governing body that had oversight into them.
Listen, my CIA and DEA handler is telling me to tell y'all that it definitely wasn't them. Okay, so
Yeah,
definitely,
it definitely wasn't them.
definitely
That
not the
settles
not the
No,
CIA,
they're smart enough.
not the DEA.
They're smart enough to use
Wasn't them.
Colombia instead. But yeah, who runs Colombia?
Girls who run Colombia, girls.
Too optimistic, and I've accepted that about myself, and it's cool. It's fine.
Like, could a government get involved in an NGO? I think the answer is probably yes, and we should probably call it like government aid.
Yeah, I mean, it's an NGO in the sense that it's not affiliated with the government, but I don't think that means that. I mean, it might currently, but yeah, and that it's not funded by like public funding or whatever. But I don't think that bars the government from having some kind of oversight into the activities of that company. And I mean, originally I said the American government because I'm thinking that like specifically American NGOs. I don't, if I'm wrong about like what we can and can't enforce with them when they're actually on the ground in another country, then that's another story. But I mean, yeah, an international body would work too. Any kind of oversight, because at this point, it's like if you've got the Church of Scientology out there barely doing anything and just setting up shop and fucking giving people feed and tests, like what are they doing? People are donating, and where's the money going? You know,
hold on, just 1 second. Thank you all. Thank you, Counterpoints, for being so kind. Thank you, Melissa Bliss, as always, for helping us get to level 4 hype train. Sorry, I can't shepherd this like I usually do. But we're level 4 hype train, 9% done, 91% left. Can we get to a level 5 hype train? Less than 2 minutes on the clock. 90 seconds left. Can we get to level 5 hype train? Help us out if you can. Be much appreciated. But thank you so much for the people who've been kind enough to give so far. I guess you want to. Well, someone wants to say something.
I was going to say, like, why, like, you can double down on this opportunity to rebuild the infrastructure by turning it also into a jobs program for the people on the ground there, rather than making U.S. jobs and bringing them via the NGO. Like, what we actually need is like to do job training and like get turn it into a jobs program so that we get the most for our money, or most for everybody's money at the same time.
Yeah, completely. And I don't even want to imply that there's anything like shady or illegal going on with the NGOs necessarily, or if even to the degree of shadiness that like the Church of Scientology had, right? But if the money isn't actually helping, then it doesn't really matter what sure, yeah. If the money isn't really helping, like if we're not seeing results from the money, it doesn't really matter to me what the people's intentions were. Like if they're going in with good intentions and still spending the money in ways that aren't benefiting, that should still be looked at, in my opinion.
Correct. Yeah. I agree.
And like, it's not I think it's somewhat reasonable, because any company that does any sort of form of business abroad, those activities do have to be like filed, or there's some sort of like governmental regulation on like the way companies can conduct business internationally. So it's not completely unheard of to see or to want the similar sort of parameters set on charitable efforts. I don't see why that would be an issue. And there's also a difference in how they report revenue coming from internationally, whether or not they're incorporated here or they have a subsidiary there. Like, I don't know. It seems pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah, so like I also think in hindsight we're not doing enough to persecute, or prosecute, I should say, prosecute NGOs that do this. We just say like, oh, we found out this this weird conspiracy, or not conspiracy, this weird report that they didn't do things right, and everyone just moves on with their lives.
Them, no.
I'm not a lawyer. Jesus. Either way, we should have a legal precedent to prosecute them.
I don't.
Yeah, well, the bar, like it is extremely difficult to be able to pursue charges, like actual legal charges against a charity. I mean,
it's the point of it.
Actors, but yeah, it's extremely.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I don't even think that there needs to be any kind of like legal intervention in some cases. Like, if they're going in with good intentions and the money still isn't working, and they're like doing what they're doing, right? Yeah. That's not necessarily something I think the law should get involved in if it's not like a scam. But I still think there should be a governing body just to make sure that the disaster relief is actually going towards like things that are helping the country recover from the disaster. And maybe that's pie in the sky of me or whatever. But
yeah, but that's all. Look, every single one of these solutions has just been throwing money at the problem instead of actually getting people in place to do the work, right?
Well, yeah, so money. Like, I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that if the NGO is like using its money in unwise ways,
no,
and
materials,
the NGO is,
right? Materials are the thing that your private organizations can buy. Right. And then having the labor sitting there by way of the military is how you get there.
Or you just imply the people who live there.
You guys keep trying to come back to just collecting up money and throwing money at the problem, right? And then complaining about the inherent amount of corruption that ends up happening as a result, right? So, like, at what point are we going to move past that to like, hey, maybe it's a good idea.
I gotta get away.
Okay, all right. And before you do, we're at level 5 hype train. 2.5 minutes left on the clock. 24% done. A certain amount left. Fuck, I can't do the math right now. No, 76% left.
I call dibs after Marcy.
Can we? Sure. Can we get to a maximum level hype train? We're almost there. We've gotten so far, like honestly, just through Amanda's like will, force of will has carried us so far. But if anyone else can help us out to complete this hype train, we much appreciate it. Thank you so much for everyone who's given so far. We're almost there. Just over 2 minutes left on the clock. Can we get to a maximum hype train? But again, thank you everyone who's gifted, and especially Amanda. I don't know what's you're a superwoman, but thank you so much. All right, let's go to Marcy and then Nightos.
Well, CTV, if you've got like an objection to something that I say, yell objection and then pause. All right, and I will sustain, or I will.
Wait, didn't you just say you weren't a lawyer?
Right. Yeah,
didn't you just say that? Then
No,
why the
that was
fuck are you trying to tell me how to act like a lawyer? That makes no sense.
We're all
Hey, that was
pretending to be
Ninetales.
experts.
Oh.
So just,
Listen,
like,
all
let
right.
it play.
No,
All
but
right,
she just
CTV,
said she's not a lawyer, right?
That
So
was-
since
that
she's
was
not a
Ninetales.
lawyer, you shouldn't
That
tell me how
was
to act like a
Ninetales.
lawyer.
That
That was
Ninetales.
Ninetales. That was
That was
Ninetales.
Out of order.
That was
Oh.
Ninetales.
All us transes look the
You're-
same.
Yeah, you're confusing your TWs. All right, listen, fucker.
Oh,
Settle
you're right.
down, all right?
Ninetales definitely has a much better camera quality.
Yeah, that's
Great,
true.
sir.
Listen, my lighting setup's gonna get improved. I'm talking to fucking Temps about it. Yeah, Cope and Seed, CTV. Listen, okay. So fucking, I lost my train of thought. So I don't know where your little fucking
Wait, you
outburst
had
came
one?
from in the middle there. I don't know where your outburst came from in the middle there because I literally said nothing about throwing money at the problem or like fucking like corruption or anything. I'm actually talking about situations where there isn't necessarily corruption, but the money just isn't being used like well. You know what I'm talking about? So I don't think necessarily that we should be throwing money at the problem, but you do need money.
I mean, if you gave some examples, it would definitely illuminate
Sure,
what
but-
you're talking about, right?
Can
What
I just
I'm
add that
saying
like,
is,
the U.S. military has famously never misspent a dollar ever, right?
Famously.
Correct.
Yeah,
I'm
and
saying-
fans
okay, so
really do cost $100 each, right?
Okay, we should let Marcy talk.
right,
Absolutely.
That's for the alien research. Jesus.
Yeah, Marcy, finish your point.
I was about to fucking pitch a suggestion, all right? I really like the idea of actually getting like job training done and training the people who live there, right? Making them like participating members of the economy in their own country so that their country can maybe like get its shit together enough for them to have some like potential for self-determination, right? I fucking love that idea, and I love the idea of nations actually being able to recover economically after disasters, right? But that's not going to happen if NGOs keep trying to do what we're saying and throw money at the problem and get their people doing the work and get their people doing the jobs that we could easily train people there to do. So I'm just saying maybe there should be some sort of magical, mystical government policy reform that makes that the main focus, right? Because I think that would work better.
Oh, the United States of the world.
But yeah, so like Marcy covered what I was going to say, so I'm just going to say we should be giving Haitian small business loans as well.
Giving them resources, because resources encompass everything, not just when we say to like provide resources, we're not just talking about the materials needed to like erect infrastructure. We're not just talking about like investments. Resources encompasses labor as well, and labor training, because ideally we would love to get them to a place where like they can like advocate for themselves and be on solid ground, right? Like the United States doesn't want to be Team America World Police, or maybe we do. I don't know.
You don't.
Yeah, but
America! Fuck yeah!
yeah, CTV. So I was gonna say, actually, you know, since I'm an American hegemonic imperialist or whatever, yes, absolutely. We have Marines and soldiers and airmen who are just sitting around, literally like mopping fucking rocks and shit when it rains. They should actually be earning their salaries by doing humanitarian aid. It builds goodwill, builds communitarian support. Sorry, what's that?
Don't get confused. The military is for killing stuff. It's not for building things.
Yeah, can we also apply this
no.
logic to like the Haitian citizens?
You don't, yeah, like this, the idea that you can save, this is like the Samantha Powers take. This is like you can save the babies if you go and bomb enough, and it's just fucking stupid. Like no bomb has ever saved a baby in its life. And the idea that
are you unfamiliar with what the babies are?
What if the military went in there, did some initial aid, and then fucking started like job training people, and then dipped when those people had like the resources that they needed to kickstart their own business?
Sure, hold on, Revolt.
I
Sounds like
have
soy
evidence
military.
evidence that could happen.
Okay, let me ask
Join
this
military.
question. When there was a bunch of Yazidis that were trapped on a mountainside about to be slaughtered by ISIS, and then we bombed the shit out of fucking ISIS, you're
Sure.
saying that we didn't save anybody in that situation?
You can make strategic and small scale ones, but not on any kind of broad scale.
Okay,
No.
I'll
Like,
concede
look
that-
at, let's we can if you want to make the
I'll-
argument, Iraq right
No.
now still doesn't have electricity 24 hours a day. Like,
Okay.
But I would
Well,
also
hey,
say
instead
that
of-
part of the advantage of the military going in, especially for like things like disaster relief, is because one thing they do a fucking fantastic job of is like logistics. And when you have that much shit like incoming to assist with relief aid and just recovery efforts, having an organization on the ground with the personnel and expertise of like dealing with large scale logistics, that is massive. Like that alone can just help accelerate the speed at which certain countries or communities are able to rebuild and get back on their feet after a natural disaster.
True, and I'm going to say this much: like, if there are holes after we try to employ everybody that we can from Haiti and give them as many small business loans, there are still holes in the logistics. Yeah, do what you have to do to make that work, but don't just go to the military by default.
right. There can be other entities besides the military. Like we could have a civil corps of engineers or something similar like that that could be deployed in very much the same way. You could even use, veterans or whatever. Like, but they don't need guns. That's the point. Is they don't need guns. And like in the sending them with guns is the thing that's problematic, because when you send guns places, they kill people, and like that's just like we
Listen,
need to get over that.
I'm not going to Haiti.
So does a
without gun,
fucking
okay?
bulldozer, right?
Like-
Well, yeah, the killdozer is pretty good at that.
I'm
That
just
was
telling.
Soulker,
Look,
right?
you're worried about a gun when in reality,
no,
the
I'm
whole
not worried
reason for
about a
them
gun. I
being
love
there
guns. I
is that
love
they can
guns. I'm
take
saying
their bulldozer, right,
it's a
or their
metaphor.
fucking ditch digger, and take it out there and help rebuild after a natural disaster. That's what we're sitting there talking about, right?
I'm-
Like, sure, you could send a civil corps of engineers, but then you're back into like a possible NGO situation, right? So, like, that's where, like, I'm saying that the Navy, right, could do manpower and equipment that's already on the ship, right? They're just sitting there taking up space. So then, like, I don't even mind us paying for the fuel to run the equipment, right? And I don't mind us feeding our own fucking sailors, right? I don't care about any part of that. The only part that I really care about is that if you want our sailors, right, out there rebuilding someone else's shit, then they need to be somehow responsible for the materials that are being used on their end. And this is where NGOs could come in and help provide those materials. That way, there can be more rebuilding done. Otherwise, we're just sitting here just twiddling our fucking thumbs and keep
Jerking it.
complaining about how corrupt shit is.
Okay, and I'm not kidding. Really briefly, a majority of what the military does is sit on its dick. Okay, so if we could get people off their dick and actually working, they would want to do that. It would be productive for everybody. It would be helpful. It's free labor. And basically, at the same time, like military veterans shit on each other for the extensive deployments that they go on. So you can't bitch if you actually have 3 or 4 deployments under your belt.
So
It's
we'll
perfect.
go to Marcy next, but just to the guys out here, have you ever actually had your dick fall asleep like your arm? Like, has that ever happened to you? It's like
Not-
it's happened.
not-
It's happened to
Not
me.
yet, not
Yeah.
yet, but I am in my 30s, so it's probably coming.
It's happened to
No.
me, and it's like it's really fucking weird. It's like
Well, the one that
alright,
the one that
Stop
gets
sitting
me is,
on it.
the
Stop
one that gets
sitting on
me
it.
is whenever I go to sit down too fast and my nuts are fucking hanging so low they sweep under and I end up sitting on them.
Oh.
That shit sucks.
I
Beautiful,
That-
beautiful
that
image.
could happen,
That-
but it,
Beautiful
of
mental
course
image.
it can.
that
I
has
hope
not
I
happened
that old.
to me, but oh no, the fact that it might happen. Okay. Anyway, Marcy.
Of course it can. Oh my god.
It's always a
So, like,
possibility.
that's-
Listen, it's always a
it's a
possibility.
great intro.
I need
for
to
you,
make this
I thought.
awkward with trans talk for 1 second, because when I used to cross my legs when I first started HRT, I used to squish my balls all the time. But estrogen saves that shit. My balls are invincible now, and I love it.
All right, that's right.
Invincible balls.
Once
yes.
again, continue with the transing of America, right? It's good for
Nice.
you. It's good for you,
all
Marcy.
a part
Good
of
for
our
you.
plan. you
Listen,
see.
I have some right wingers in my audience. Stop scaring them. Jesus Christ.
Hey, Connor's
You guys will
right-wingers.
love the gay agenda.
Literally the point. That was
Wait,
literally the
Connor's
fucking point.
right-wingers. Connor's right-wingers. Have you ever thought about your gender? Like, really thought about it? I'm just saying. You can just think about it. There's
I
nothing
think
wrong with
everyone's a
thinking
little
about
gay.
it.
Everyone's like,
Okay.
I leave for
anyway,
2 seconds and y'all talking
gotta-
about
No, we
sweet
just
dicks
just
and-
They're trying to
hard
trans my
balls.
audience.
yes,
It's
you.
part of,
Have
it's
you
part of
ever?
PrimeCayes' conspiracy to keep me from commenting on this issue.
Well, we
Dear-
had
dear-
a poll, and every so Prime has experienced this. CTV has experienced this. Connor has not. Has you ever? You know when you like lay on your arm for too long and it falls asleep? Have you ever done that to your dick? Because some people have, and some people have not. And I, for one, until today, I was today years old when I first considered that like that could ever happen. I just did
No,
not
never.
even think about it.
Well,
Okay,
that's kind of like
Connor's
the basic
audience.
tenet. That's kind of like
I-
the
I-
basic tenets of a cock ring too, right?
I have some
Is
comforting
it?
news.
I'm not.
Oh
I think you're using it wrong, man.
Is this some
Okay.
weird early onset ED? I don't know what this is.
No. You just like sit
no!
on
I'm
your.
just a nice Christian.
You can just
girl.
sit on your dick. You can or lay on your dick in an awkward manner, like it constricts blood flow.
This is a size thing. You have to have a certain amount of size for this to be
No, why
possible.
would-
I
That
wasn't
makes
gonna
sense.
say it.
Prime, respect.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
Yes.
since we're still here,
No,
that could never
this
happen
doesn't
to
make
me.
sense.
I'm just saying. I'm not like
Boobs
that.
can't
Yeah,
fall asleep,
I tuck mine
so
into my
don't
socks so it
worry.
doesn't flop around, you know?
Look, Marcy, I wanted to set things up for you so that you can then knock it down. So, Marcy, take it from there, from the sleeping dicks. Go ahead.
Not to kill the mood, guys, but I'm going back from sleeping dicks to disaster relief and humanitarian
It is
crises.
a disaster.
Ooh.
Have you
Not
ever
to-
had your
That's
dick
called
fall asleep?
range.
What the fuck
That's
is
called
that?
range.
That's called. I know it is, and you never waste a moment. So I'm taking advantage of this awkward pause between the conversations. I never waste a fucking moment. Okay, always be girl bossing, always. So listen, I actually kind of agree with critically thinking. Oh god,
You
I
should.
never thought the day would come, but I just want to say
This isn't the
like,
first time. Don't act
Okay,
surprised.
listen, CTV, maybe not. I don't know, but there's two fucking things that are true, right?
I know
One-
we make claims
all right,
and then we don't know. Got it.
All right, yeah. Here's one thing that is true. Okay,
Trying to
Uh,
get you.
boots on the ground warfare, while still common, has become much less common. All right, since technology has developed and since nations have developed, boots on the ground warfare has become much less common, and it's been replaced in large part by economic warfare and by sort of other things like that, sanctions, things like that. Okay, great, we know that. Second thing that is true, the United States military budget is a fucking bloated whale. Okay, so I think that a good use of that giant fucking military budget that we have and a good use of the giant fucking military presence that we have now that boots on the ground warfare is decreasing internationally, and I would hope that's something that we're all happy about, right? Due to the cost of human life associated with
I don't
boots
know.
on the
Ask
ground
the, ask
warfare.
the Afghanis.
Right, okay. Well, you know what? We're gonna get to that, and this
And
is
it's
not
Afghans, not Afghanis.
this is not,
I was
uh,
corrected
yeah.
last
Is it
time.
Afghan?
and I gotta say, this is not.
Yeah,
wait,
I
stop.
was
Marcy,
Afghan
Hold on,
too.
I'm trying to get to that.
I don't want to.
Hold on.
Listen, I don't want to spoil. I don't want to spoil the.
Marcy, finish your point so that we can get to the next topic because we have run out of time here, and I want to.
I don't want to spoil the next topic, but CTV, this is not a morally inconsistent position from me. All right. So I think that because boots on the ground warfare is getting less common, and because that's a thing that ultimately should be strive for in some sense, right? Sure. I think that a good use of that money and that presence and that giant military that we have that doesn't seem to be going anywhere might be to engage in more humanitarian efforts because we do have the resources and we do have the manpower. But I think that we could also incorporate job training and NGOs and everything like that. I think that there's a little room for everyone to get in when a country is so crippled by a disaster like this. And especially after this much political turmoil and this fucking other disaster and the impending tropical storm. Like, they are fucking ravaged, and the fact that we're not doing anything about it with the giant military presence that we have, that we're focusing on other shit is tragic, I think.
Okay, so we're gonna go to our next topic, right? Thank you so much. Thank you again to the people who helped up the hype train. Thank you for the ones who donated, especially Amanda, who like powered that whole thing through. Thank you, Amanda. You're being awfully kind. I don't know why, but you're an amazing person. I appreciate it. And another amazing person stopped by my chat. Yes, I'm going to take the time to point her out because I love her so much. She's my special friend. Joe the Silly Serious. Hey Joe, I haven't talked to you in a long time. I hope things are going. But Joe, I love you so much, and you're an amazing human being, and I have nothing but love, springing from my heart from you. So yeah, there you go.
So nice.
Yeah, and exclamation point, silly, to see her, go to her YouTube channel where she has an amazing video, right? And she's gonna have a second one at some point in time in the future. But like, it's an amazing video that literally blew up the internet. And then check out her Twitch channel because she's an incredible streamer as well. But I love you so much, Joe. And yeah, all right. So let's move on. From that, from my love fest, I'll go all night how much I love Joe, but let's move on. So Xbox Choice Social and Chat, if you're just finding this channel, hit that follow button, hit that follow button right now, make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live, and follow us on Twitter. I forget, what the fuck am I doing now? Follow us on Twitter. That's where you find channel updates. Jump to our Discord. That's where we have all our conversations. They all happen on Discord, so you want to be there. That's the heart and soul of the community. And of course, jump to our YouTube. That's where you will find the VODs. All our VODs will be there, so you won't find them here. Find them on YouTube. That's the place to be. All right, I'm moving on. So let's go to the next topic. Next topic. You think I'd have that in front of me, but I don't. All right, topic 2. The Taliban have retaken Afghanistan. It happened not even a day after the U.S. pulled out. After 20 years of nation building, the country fell in a matter of days. Was the Afghanistan invasion worth it at all? What should our response to be to this development? Should the U.S. introduce sanctions against the Taliban, or should we recognize them as a legitimate government and try to help Afghanis by providing economic opportunities? So, yeah. So we'll go down the line. And lucky, I was waiting for Gambit to come back because I wanted him to be first. That's his favorite position. And I'll always have it. So go ahead.
Yeah, so like our great, and I meant to do great, but our great President Joe Biden said, we were not there to nation build. We was there to neutralize a threat, and we did that, and we left, and everything fell apart like most people probably expected. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was like less than a year ago, and I think it was Joko Willing, but it could have been somebody else, and he was talking about how when they would go on missions with the Afghan army, that they were just ill-equipped and they weren't really effective. So I think a lot of people thought this was going to happen. Maybe they didn't think it was going to happen so quickly, but so I think it was expected. Should we do trades or sanctions with the new Afghan government? I think it's gonna be interesting to see if they hold up their promises and how they treat women. And I think depending on how those developments go would shape my view on how we should engage with them in the future. But yeah, I'm not surprised with what happened. I don't think we should go back or anything. There was talks of that earlier, but yeah, I don't think it makes sense. I think it's an unfortunate situation. I think we should wish all of those people the best, but I think it's just that an unfortunate situation.
CTV.
Well,
Do you not want to go?
there's. Oh no,
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, buddy. I thought
look, Prime. There's such thing called building a dramatic moment, right? Like you gotta allow people, right, to build it up.
It was dramatic.
Did you say you're a referee?
Look, I know why you invited me because I'm charismatic, right? So you gotta just let the eagle fly, right? You gotta let the wolf roam. You know what I mean?
I didn't know that I was in the presence of a thespian.
Gotta let the shark swim.
That's right. That's right. Gotta let the shark swim.
Gotta let the dicks be erect. Okay. So go ahead.
Wait a minute, did you just call CTV a lesbian?
No, I said
lesbian.
I said thespian, and then I fucking said that.
Did you just call him a lesbian? That there is a slander upon his name.
You got to properly erect your dick, right? You got to properly erect your dick.
And your dog.
Now, the situation in Afghanistan fell apart because we probably shouldn't have been there trying to nation build to begin with, unless the people of that land had voted to be a state of the United States. How else are we supposed to actually help other lands across the world, right, to the degree that Americans would want them to be helped without them being a part of our union, right? So then, like, the same things that I have said a few different times on different panels for different topics ends up us coming back to, like, if you really wanted to be able to solve some of these problems, then understanding that, like, the other lands of the world joining as a state via vote, right? Not through, military conquest or imperialism by a gun, right? But by the people voting there to be a part of the system. And then also, like, us having a vote that in our own fucking system, getting Americans to stop being so afraid, right, of other states joining the union for whatever the fucking reason is, right? Whether there's too many stars on the flag or whatever the case is, right? The reality is that if you want the type of change to happen in other parts of the world the same way that it has here, then it needs to be set up in such a way to where they become a state where they have a lot of their own sovereignty in issues that would matter there, and that there's a centralization via the federal government, right? But it's limited in its scope, i.e. kind of like the original framework was, where the federal government was really only doing immigration and foreign policy, right? But at a point where, like, the federal government ends up being, like, say, the one world government, then you end up stopping with the need for those, because now everybody can travel freely. They're all part of the same system. I know it sounds crazy, right? I mean, how are you going to get the Chinese to agree to this? You're not. But what you can do is that through exercising our system and capitalism and the ability to be able to have individual liberty and people making free decisions in an open market, the power behind that, and it go globally without, like, there being an exploitation of labor in other parts of the world just because other companies want to be able to compete in our markets, right? So all in all, unless there's going to be a state made, we shouldn't be there. And that's just how I feel about it.
You are a single individual, CTV. Thank you for being here, as always. All right, let's go to Counterpoints.
Yeah, so no, it wasn't worth it. No, we shouldn't have been there. Basically, I think the next time that a terrorist kills 3,000 American citizens and causes a few $1 billion worth of damage, we need to develop human intelligence, hunt that person down, hunt down all his associates, and kill him swiftly and quietly. Invading Afghanistan was probably a mistake. Invading Iraq was probably a mistake. I think we need to just hold guilty parties accountable, and that's about it. We could do the same job from an American hegemonic perspective with 80% less blood and treasure with a concept called foreign internal defense. I'll talk about it in the open.
So. That was actually brief. And so okay, whenever Connor says he's going to be brief, that's a fucking lie. But he can actually manage it. But when he says it, you just know the very opposite's about to happen. And if anyone else can be brief too, because I do want to jump into the open. So be brief with your openings, please. All right, but go ahead, Maddy. I mean, no. Right, that wasn't a shot at you.
Oh no, but it should be. Quite honestly. Yeah, I'll just say this then. We spent 20 years in Afghanistan fighting against the Taliban and propping up their government and training their military forces. So to see all of that come undone over the course of a week after our departure is jarring. Not only because my heart breaks for the Afghan people who are facing this uncertain future, but also because I think about the thousands of American service members who lost their lives in this prolonged conflict. I think of the Afghan civilians who lost their lives in this prolonged occupation. And I wonder was it worth it? Because I don't think it was. I mean, we spent billions of dollars in this prolonged conflict, much of which was funneled to private contractors who used it as a cash cow to overcharge for various services that were leveraged by the U.S. military. And I think it's disgraceful. And I think it just goes to show that when we're in these sort of prolonged occupations, we can't realistically just have the United States military propping up an entire government for an indiscriminate, extensive period of time. That just simply isn't sustainable. And it's also just not the best use of our military members. I mean, it's just a tragedy all around, and it makes me really furious when I think about the fact that Trump earlier just deleted all of his tweets alleging or referring to the Taliban or Afghanistan, and on his website completely removed the whole page where he was touting the success of them reaching some sort of prisoner exchange agreement with the Taliban back in February. So I think I agree with GSU or Gambit, where it's like, I think Joe Biden did the right thing. I think his speech today was fantastic. It was a hard thing, but you know what? He did what every other president thus far had, since we started in Afghanistan. He did what they weren't able to, and he finally got us the fuck out of there. But you know, it was going on for too fucking long in the first place.
Maddy, I know you tried your best. You tried your best.
Oh, I know.
I love you. I know it's right. You're just too great. Ninetales.
Yeah, well, that's do something.
Okay, yeah. So I'm one of those America bad people. I think that America can only fuck things up. No, that's not my only take. What's particularly shitty is that America thinks it can go into a place, destabilize it, and then as soon as the shit hits the fan, where's America? Where are they? They're avoiding the consequences of their actions, of course. This is what powerful, wealthy nations do to less powerful nations to assert their dominance on a global stage. They literally say, "I don't want your government. Do this shit," and then they do nothing to pick up the pieces. This is why I have no sympathy for those fucking pilots who are like, "Oh no, we're gonna die. We have to take off." It's like, no, you can risk your own life for once. Considering how many fucking people were risking their lives on the runway. But this is probably going to come up, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
Oh, it will definitely come up, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I think it will definitely come up. Oh, Ninetales. You are my pocket Molotov, is what you are. So you should put that in your Twitter bio, a pocket Molotov. I think it's a good name for a band, actually. But anyway, sorry, I'm distracted. T-Jump. You're muted. Jump.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough situation when you have a country that is run by mostly terrorists and you're cleaning them up, essentially trying to remove them and implement a legitimate government of some kind. But to do that takes a lot more investment than what we're willing to give, and so we have to just essentially just pack up and go and just let the terrorists run over. It's a terrible situation no matter what you do. Like in an ideal world, our goal should be to remove the terrorist organization and implement a stable government, which is what we tried to do. We just failed miserably at it. So I don't know what the right decision is in this situation, because the goal was essentially correct, to remove the terrorists, implement a democratic society. It just didn't work. And I don't know how to make it work, especially in that situation when there isn't as much public support for a democracy as in other countries. So it's a hard pill to swallow in what to do in those kinds of situations. And so I don't know.
Okay, great. Marcy.
Great. So I think Maddy made an interesting point there with like every president kind of failed to do this prior to Biden. And, you know, I distinctly remember I was, I think, 9 when Obama first got elected. And I remember my mom was a very political person. She was like a hardcore liberal, and she constantly talked about how Obama was going to bring the boys back home. And, you know, they've all been talking about bringing them back from Afghanistan since fucking we went into Afghanistan. That's been a campaign promise. It was a campaign promise from Obama both times, and it was a campaign promise for Trump, and neither of them did it, and Biden did. And so what I'm saying with all this is that I think that pulling out of Afghanistan was an ugly inevitability. Someone was going to do it, and I don't want to say that pulling out was bad, because it's going to have terrible fucking consequences, and I wish that there had been a better exit strategy. Personally, I wish we would have like evacuated a bunch of fucking refugees kind of under the table before doing it, so that we wouldn't have had the humanitarian crisis that we're having right now. But you know, I don't think they handled it well. But do I think that we were going to pull out eventually? Yeah, you know, I feel like we've been there way too fucking long. Invading was not worth it. That's a certified L. I think everybody can agree that's a certified L. But I want to say something off of kind of this. I'm America neutral, right? I am not an America bad person. I don't think we can only do wrong. I think America is very powerful, and very powerful nations and very wealthy nations often act in their own self-interest, you know? And I think that that's bad sometimes, and other times it happens to have good results. But I think that America can act in a way that is humanitarian, and can act in a way that puts human life in other countries first, and treats people in the Middle East with the same dignity as we treat our own people. I just don't think we do. So I am open to solutions to this problem that involve the United States. For one, the question in Discord said something about sanctions. I think imposing sanctions on the Taliban is a pretty good idea, because I don't think it's a good idea to immediately go back. You know, I don't know if plugging back in with boots on the ground is the best idea. I think it's bad that we abandoned them, just like it's bad that we abandoned the Kurds, and it's bad that we make these big fat fucking dumps and then abandon them when shit gets too bad and when it becomes politically efficient to do so. But I think that they could have gone about it better. That's it. I'm rambling.
Nine Tails, put your hand up. We're not done yet.
But I know. I'm just
preemptively putting your hand up. Okay, got it. No problem. All right. She's got them all already. All right, so let's go to Vault Rise.
Yeah, so like I want to start by saying that like Canada left Afghanistan in 2014, and like if you want to go fight there, the French Foreign Legion is going to apparently be continuing support, and they'll take anybody, and anybody can sign up and go. So go ahead and get your ass in there if you're ready to fucking like commit people's lives for the cause that you think is so great. Like, there's no chance that America was ever going to do anything in Afghanistan besides what happened. There was zero chance. Like, we needed to do what we did yesterday and today in 2001. We needed to go in there and kill Osama bin Laden and come back and get the hell out of there. The problem is that like the United States has this idea that we can continually like we've been doing this since 1949. The CIA was created in 1949. The very first thing that they did is they flipped over the government in Syria, and we handed it to a guy with the last name Assad. You might have recognized him from other like the escapades of his son, who's still running the damn country. And like beyond that, we moved from there to Iran, and like from Iran to Egypt, and from Egypt to I think from there to Iraq, I think. But like the place has been torn apart because of us. Like, we got to stop fucking doing it. Like, it's stupid that we went in the first place. We went with no plan at all. We didn't have a plan. We've been constantly winging it the entire time we were there. We wasted so much money, so much like spoiled so many lives and so much energy and you know, not to mention the toxic shit that we dumped all over the place and everything else. Like, it was horrendous that we went there, and what we did there, it was terrible. Now, is it worse than the Taliban's going to do? I don't know. Maybe. Like, I mean, like the Taliban's not going to be drone striking people to death. Like, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. But there's also like not that much of a difference between the Taliban and some of our allies, like Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Arabian government like chops people's heads off for witchcraft every couple of weeks, and like they do all sorts of ridiculous, like really heinous things. And they have all these very backwards views about women too. So it's like, we have created a situation where we took this like, you know, terrorist group that had like 57 or 58% control of the country when we first went in. We gave them 100% control of the country. We gave them more money, more men, more machine guns, more, you know, tanks and more Humvees than they had before. They've got more clout, and they've got more, you know, control of the country. Like, they've got 100% control of the country now. So that's what the United States military can do in 20 years with an unlimited amount of money and an unlimited amount of like resources of all kinds. And now to think that we can solve problems like that is absolutely insane. And we need to change our policy immediately.
Let's go to all right. So we're open panel, and we'll start with with Nine Tails, and then I
Go
guess
ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, so the problem that I have with sanctions, like prior to this, the UN had sanctions on the Taliban, which, okay, say what you want about that. But now the problem is that if they end up taking a seat in office and becoming legitimatized, those sanctions are now going to affect the entire country. So I don't think we can just do the same sanctions that are already on individual members of the Taliban by the UN like we do now without actually hurting Afghan citizens. And I don't think the point is to punish them.
No, the point isn't to punish them, but I mean, it's kind of like Revolt, where I was just saying, like, if we had just gone in, killed Osama, and gotten out, we would have done the best that we could have possibly done. Good job, America. You solved the problem that you created. Great, you know. But fucking if since we didn't do that, everything beyond that point is a question of harm reduction to me. Is this the right time to pull out? Absolutely fucking not. Is there ever
Yeah.
going to be a right time? And has there ever been? No. But now that fucking the Taliban might take the seat of power, we have to grapple with the fucking ugly reality that things that we do are not going to be 100% good all of the time. There are negative consequences to anything that we might do, and so we have to weigh the options, right?
Why
We
do
have to
you
weigh
think
the
this
option
is
of.
a-
You said you want harm
This isn't a
reduction,
negative
right?
consequence to something we necessarily did, though.
You said
It
you
is,
want
though.
harm reduction, right?
It
So
is.
like this is probably the opposite of harm reduction in my opinion. That's all.
No,
That's
it's
my
not
only
the opposite.
Well,
contestation.
I think. Well, my question is, I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. I'm just pulling the question out. I don't know if the people of Afghanistan, not the Taliban, but the people who are now having their fucking rights taken away from them, right, would be better off under a Taliban government that's heavily sanctioned, or under like more fucking warfare, like U.S. troops going back, or under just the Taliban and us leaving them alone. I agree with Revolt Rise. We are allies with governments that are the same level of fucking reactionary garbage as the Taliban, like Saudi Arabia's government. So
One of the
I don't
things,
have an answer to that question.
yeah.
I just think that it's an interesting one. I think that
One of the
sanctions
things-
are a good, or a force for good when they're enacted against Russia right now. I think that our sanctions on Russia are great. And so
One of-
I.
So
Maggie.
Sorry, I'm trying to
Nine
find
Tails
a way.
respond, and then we'll go to Maddie.
Yeah,
And
one of the
then
things I
Connor.
just
And then
want people
Connor.
to consider is that the Taliban wants to be internationally recognized now. That makes them malleable to international pressures to not, do shit to their citizens and stuff like that. So I think if we sanction them, we immediately create an enemy. But if we say, hey, we have these things, can you stop hurting women's rights? They're probably more malleable than ever right now.
I have a big
What?
issue with that because generally groups that are motivated by religious extremism do not become malleable. I would not say that, for example, if the KKK, the good Christian Knights of the KKK, were to break off and form their own nation, that they would be immune to sanctions because they would start to seek legitimacy,
no.
right?
I'm
The
not seeing
KKK
immunity.
is gonna be the KKK.
I'm not saying immunity. I'm just saying right now their ideology isn't the only thing driving them. They want international legitimacy, and I think we can exploit that.
Let's go to Maddie, and then Connor, and then
Yeah.
GSU.
So I mean, what I think is really like the primary concern, because I think, okay, we were there for 20 years, 2 decades, and I wish we had allocated far more resources to things like infrastructure, education, and investing in actual like local community building, rather than simply just maintaining a robust military presence and training the Afghan military. Because I mean, when all of this happened, I went and looked through, because there was a decent amount of reporting on exactly how budget was allocated for our efforts. And I mean, the amount that actually got spent on things like just basic infrastructure was minuscule compared to what we spent on like more, combat, like military like operations. I wish we had used our power to reduce the influence of the Taliban and actually contribute to meaningful economic development, especially in rural Afghanistan. The Taliban wasn't all that unpopular because, in addition to just generally like having a bigger presence there and being more like known members of the community, they also like provided some sort of like infrastructure and financial relief. I mean, the bulk of the Taliban's money actually came from the drug trade. So I think in terms of where we are now, because that's all like hindsight's 2020, right? I wish this is what we would have done. For what we can do now in terms, I think Marcy was great about bringing up just like it's harm reduction at this point. I think the absolute least thing we could do is open up our country to refugees and fast track green card status for interpreters and other Afghan citizens who partnered with and helped the US military during our occupation, because for many of them, they did so with the promise that the military would then bring them and their family over to the United States. And it simply hasn't materialized, whether it's because they're just stuck in bureaucratic limbo or whatever it is, and there's too much red tape. I think we need to streamline that process. And this is a disaster of our own making. So in order to properly atone for the fallout, we need to accept as many refugees as possible. Otherwise, yeah, it's blood on our hands.
Let's go to Counter, then GSU.
Yeah, so I think this does show the limits of nation building, quote unquote. How much you can pour water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom and expect some kind of positive result. I think 20 years, $50 billion a year, military consultation, air support, all that kind of stuff. That's basically, I think that's a fine price in blood and treasure to pay for whatever the fuck this goddamn quagmire was. The point being, though, that we're trying to reconceptualize how we interact with nations going forward. And I would hope that after Iraq and Afghanistan, full-scale conventional invasion is off the table. I would hope that we learn this fucking lesson. I think they'd probably hope that we learn this lesson all the way back in Vietnam. What the concept that I think is important is something called foreign internal defense. It's something that the Marines do. It's something that the Green Berets do, where rather than invading with a conventional force of a few 100,000, you show up with a few dozen dudes. You train the local security forces in order to maintain their own security. You automatically have a certain amount of goodwill from the people because you're not the person who's kicking in the door and killing their neighbors. It's their own government. It's their own law enforcement. It's their own people who are local. Additionally, during World War II, there was a program called the Flying Tigers that we hosted in China, in which volunteer Western pilots with Western logistical support flew basically fighter support for the Chinese nationalist government at the time. I think you could absolutely institute a similar volunteer program for Western either contractors or volunteers or whatever to basically provide air support for countries that have a terrorism issue. So I think that we can do the same thing that the stated goals of the global war on terror are for maybe 80% reduction in cost. And that's where I would want to push America going forward.
Okay, JSU.
I just keep think we just calling this nation building when what was really happening was we were there to take out a threat that posed harm to us through national security. I don't know what elements of this everybody else is contributing to nation building, but this is what Biden said, and this is what largely has seemed to be the case. It's been a fight against what, like, bin Laden, ISIL, blah, 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 right? So I don't particularly know why we think this was nation building, but yeah, I think
a fuckload of money doing it.
It wasn't nation building. They don't even have electricity anywhere in the country 24 hours a day. Still,
No.
they spent like $20 billion.
No, this wasn't successful nation building, but that.
Give them up.
I don't know if it was attempted nation building though.
Yeah, that's a problem. We don't. Nobody knows. Like the people who did it don't even know what it was. Like nobody ever put a fucking stop sign on the end of it. Like or said like what the goals were. Like right.
So it was definitely nation building.
I
want to give T-Jump a chance. Go ahead, T-Jump.
So that was. I didn't get to finish.
Nation.
Oh,
you want to finish? Go ahead.
I think what everybody should grapple with is that our country went there to take out a threat and leave, and this was going to happen. Whether it happened 5 years ago or 10 years from now, like this is exactly.
Then why didn't we leave in 2012?
2001, 2002.
Wait, bin Laden died
in 2011.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's why we didn't leave in 2001.
But when we went all the way through Afghanistan, and we knew he wasn't in Afghanistan in 2001, like 2.
Nobody knew where the fuck he was. Come on.
We knew he wasn't in
We
Afghanistan.
Kind of.
Oh, get the fuck
So
out of here.
I want to give T-Jump a chance. Go ahead.
My psychic said.
Yeah. So it was definitely nation building, because in nation building, the first thing you have to do in a hostile nation is build an army. That's why we didn't spend more money on infrastructure and schools, because it's a complete waste of money unless you have some kind of military to defend it from the attacking force. So in nation building, the correct strategy is to build an internal military first that can defend itself, so that then you can protect the schools and roads that you build. So it was definitely an attempt at nation building. It followed the correct economic strategy of nation building. It just failed. So it's wrong to criticize them as having not been doing nation building, because it's what they were doing, or trying to do at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they just
and
literally
you don't-
took over the
You would
Afghan
build
army.
up the army there if you're trying.
What?
To
Oh
fight
my
a
god.
threat.
Oh my god. Please.
Let Connor go, because I don't want to see him like.
I might
blow a
die.
vessel.
I want that to happen too, but
Oh my god! In my 50s, if I am still streaming, you will actually see me die on stream. So the fucking, oh my god! So no, the problem that we had was an absolute fucking kleptocracy. Okay, kleptocracy, for those of you who don't know, was basically a fucking state run by thieves. Every single fucking thing that we built in there was gutted. Literally, my fucking. So
what am I talking about? The U.S.
No, well, no, I'm talking about Afghanistan, because if you think that if you think the U.S. is a fucking kleptocracy, you haven't seen a real one. So holy fucking shit. So okay, so basically, what was happening was literally everybody knew this was happening. We were talking about how Afghanistan was going to collapse back in 2011 when I first got out, and the reason why is because the Afghan National Army, 2/3 of it only existed on paper. A local fucking. A local fucking war. Well, no, I'm not, because I think T-Jump's correct in his assessment that we tried. It just didn't work. And part of the reasons why it didn't work is because we were working with a fucking kleptocracy. So literally we fucking said, hey, we'll pay you, $100 a month per person who serves in the army. Local warlord says, okay, this guy, you come sign your name on my roster saying that you came to monthly drill. I'll give you $20. I'll pocket the 80. And that was literally like 60 to 70% of the Afghan National Army existed only on paper. When it came to, we gave them, transport planes in order to move actual crack infantry units around the fucking country. Those planes were grounded for a year because despite ordering parts, all those parts disappeared the second they showed up. Pretty much every single person who trained Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police that I talked to, they were fucking, well, they didn't laugh because their friends fucking died trying to do this shit, but they were basically so upset and angry about how shitty the entire situation was, because they would literally show up with fresh AK-47s, fresh uniforms for the ANP and the ANA, and they would be down in the bazaar the next fucking day. The Afghan National Police and the Afghan National Army outside of major cities hasn't existed the entire time we've been there, despite us constantly pouring money into it.
Which is why
holy shit, I'm so sick of American exceptionalism making excuses for themselves. When you fucked up, like, okay, no, let me just respond to that. Let me respond to that, because
your country ran away in 2014, which was probably smart.
So,
oh, I don't care about my country. Don't use my country against me. What I'm saying though is, you sent people down there to be quote advisors for the local police groups that were being formed, and all you did was say, "Hey, we'll give you a weapon. Now fight for us." And then all you did was bark orders at them the whole time. No. Did you take them on military training drills?
That's what happened.
No. Did you train them to use new equipment?
You don't know what you're talking about.
Let me go find the report. Let me go find the report.
Okay, find the report.
I'm trying to report a one minuscule operation.
Hold on. GSU not finished his point, so go ahead. Then we're going to go to Maddy. But go ahead, GSU.
Yeah, 9/10. If you find one report from one minuscule operation, it's possible, but there's a vast amount of evidence to talk to what I said and what Connor said of people trying to work with their military and they just weren't skilled enough. But I think, Connor, you elaborated on everything that I said, and it's exactly why what was happening there wasn't nation building. Like everything that you said was exactly why it wasn't nation. We were there to neutralize threats, and once we felt like that was done, and maybe we stayed too long, we got out. And what's happening right now is the fallout of what would have happened eventually, regardless, because we weren't there to nation build.
Okay, so my question is in goal or intent, because the reason why I would defend T-Jump's perspective is I think the intent was to actually try to create a safe, secure Afghanistan. It just didn't fucking work. So if you're saying in execution, we didn't achieve our goals, I completely agree with you. So it's failed nation building.
No,
We
I'm
didn't
saying
even,
the opposite.
you're saying we didn't even try.
I don't think there's anything that our goals there were to neutralize threats, and we did.
Well,
And,
okay,
and
but
through neutral,
Yeah.
wait, through neutralizing those threats, of course, we had to work with allies on the ground there. Yeah, but
Okay, so-
once we
Mhm.
felt comfortable, we were like, all right, I'm out.
Okay, so my follow-up question for that then, because I think that's really interesting, is so Iraq and Afghanistan both kind of created additional enemies, whether you're talking about like Daesh, ISIS, Haqqani Network, like all these people that basically started coming after us. So we expanded the problem through invasion instead of like targeted assassination against Osama bin Laden. So basically, my question is, do you think it was intentional that we made a bigger mess so then we could clean it up? Like even more?
No.
Like what's your
No, I
Okay.
mean things happen. I think we went in there with a goal. The situation morphed, and we morphed as we felt our national security was important.
Right. But you got to
Okay, so
remember
did we, sorry, just
can
really quickly,
yeah.
Revolt, just really quickly. So do
Mhm.
you think that we stayed in Afghanistan in 2000 after 2011 because we were waiting to see what the pullout from Iraq was going to be like, and then seeing whether or not like Daesh was formed? Because we didn't even know that ISIS was a thing in 2011 or 2012.
No.
So why wouldn't we have jumped ship at that point? That's my question.
I don't know, but I also don't know what our intelligence agencies knew that the general public didn't, right? But
True.
I can't answer your question for sure.
I'll-
But I don't know what we don't know, right?
Sure.
I think that the reason why we've been there this long is strictly because this is going to be the outcome all the time. This is always going to be the outcome, and nobody wanted to be the one that was holding the bag.
I
Why do you
like
think it's
that.
always going to be the outcome? Like, it's not always going to be the outcome. It's definitely possible
This
for
was,
nation building.
this was always going to be the
Yeah.
outcome of Afghanistan.
So-
always.
Well, in Afghanistan, but what about Korea and Europe? What do you have to say
I mean,
there?
yeah, Korea is great. Like, look we're still there. We're not in the wars. First of all, the war's not over. Second of all, we've been there for how long? And we were 80% of their GDP for the first 20 years after the war. And like,
Right.
so, yeah, if you want to
Running
be
up
80%
Right.
of the GDP of a country, we can do it. We can do it,
Yeah,
but it
so-
takes
And
80%
now
of
they
the
have
possible.
GDP.
K-pop, so I
Yeah,
feel like
the only way to get out of the off the Korean peninsula would be to make South Korea a state of the United States.
Oh boy! So before we go down that route, I want to go to Maddie before we do that. But I want to say that I've been reading about this, and I think there's an interesting case to be made that this could have been a success, and by success I mean that we could have formed a stable government that could have lasted, but maybe not in the form that Americans, at least the American government, would think is optimal. Right? I feel like that the government that was there, the U.S.-backed government that's now gone. I'll call them the Karzai government, even though Karzai wasn't the last president.
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
But the Karzai government.
No.
That government did not get buy-in from everyone. Right? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
It was a centrally focused organization that it didn't reach out to its rural partners, right? Where you'll find the fucking if you want to find anywhere like that gives comfort and support to the Taliban, it's going to be the ones out like in the rural areas, and we didn't get buy-in from them. And they have their own history, right? They have their own history, conflicts that are like invisible to Western audience, right? We see the Afghan government and we see the Taliban, right? And we're like, well, if you're not with them, then you're obviously with us, right? You're obviously with the Karzai-backed government, right? But that's not the case. They have all kinds of reasons to fight each other, right? Centuries-long reasons to fight each other. And so there was no unified like on all levels, on every single level. There wasn't a unified presence there, a unified identity to fight for this thing, right? Which was the Karzai government. Like Afghanistan, this is not. I feel like it's interesting because you see pictures coming out of Afghanistan and they're bad, they're terrible, and like more terrible things will come out of Afghanistan as well. But I don't think everyone in Afghanistan thinks like the world is ending now. I think
Yeah, for sure.
a lot of
They
them are just like a lot of them just feel that this is just a changing of the guard, right? And some of them certainly are going to welcome the Taliban back, right? Certainly, but others are just thinking this is a changing of the guard. And while Americans think this is an apocalypse, they might look at it differently. So so this is not like so. When people are wondering why these people didn't fight, well, God, there were so many reasons. Like, for instance, like Counterpoint said, like the army was just like army in quotes, right?
They're outnumbered like 3-1.
Yes, exactly that. They were all number 3-1s. They were talking about those provincial capitals that have been taken, right? It was just like a fucking village, right? That's in the center of this province, of this massive space, and they had a few buildings that are controlled by the Afghan government. By that, I mean we paid a few guys to watch it. And then when the Taliban rolled through, they're like, all right, this is ours now. And they're like, cool, I'm out. Like, I'm not getting shot for this shit. And that was it. And it's like how it happened. So
they didn't even fight.
With the AK again, and that's it. That's no change. It's the same guy.
I have
AK now.
I have friends that were deployed there too, just to like try to reinforce one of your points that I think a lot of people might be missing too. But like the locals were like, some of them, at least from two of my friends that served there, they just didn't want occupation anymore, right? Even if it was just like the Taliban is taking over or something, it's like just a change in regime, and it's just like, all right, the USA is out, let's try to build ourselves up. So there's a lot of that. Like we do have to deal with their army was like, all right, we just surrender, right? Like that's telling. So when we try to blame the US for all of this, I think we ignore like so much nuance.
Let's go to Maddy, then Ninetales.
Yeah, I had a question, but it was answered in my chat. I was asking, so when Connor was talking about how certain people were in charge of training security forces or military forces in Afghanistan, where essentially they would be provided weapons and funds to do that, but they would just be like, oh, just like sign here to say you've done it. I wonder if that's simply just a failure of oversight to ensure that the operations that we assume are being carried out are actually being carried out, because if they weren't being if there wasn't actually large scale training going on, if there wasn't actually like the cultivation of a robust military operation of native Afghans, like that's a major problem, because that's where a lot of our fucking money went, and presumably I'm assuming that's why a lot of military service members were shipped abroad to contribute to it. Like that, I think. And granted, I know a lot of this, presumably those that were skimming the money off the top were like the regional warlords or whatever. So the question remains, like, what are we able to do then to counter that kind of influence? Because in the same vein, I wonder, a lot of those communities also harbored Taliban fighters because they distrusted America and I can kind of see the point. It's like when you're being bombed or having drone strikes, but you're told that these are your liberators, but you have people on the ground who are like either from your community or a community like yours. That's prone to generate maybe some distrust and skepticism. So, I wonder, like, well, what could we have done to reduce the influence that, like, not only the Taliban has in like certain regions, but also these like corrupt regional warlords who use the United States military essentially as an ATM.
Let's go to Ninetales, and then you, Counter.
Oh, I was asking. Well, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you were asking Counter. But I wanna still get to Ninetales first. Counter, write it down.
I'll write it down.
But yeah.
I'll write it down.
Thank you.
Ninetales, you're muted.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, Counter. Like I probably came off wrong and made it sound like it wasn't the things that you listed why things broke apart. I did find an article from like a firsthand perspective, and I know people here don't want to hear anecdotes, but from a firsthand perspective of what went wrong, that reflects what I read in the report that I currently can't find because I look at things through incognito because I'm paranoid, so I don't save history. So yeah, I'm weird. So like, yeah, so I'll post it again. It's in Twitch chat, but I also left it a version in voice chat on Twitch or Discord, I meant. And so yeah, the big three problems were like, we went in there without a real plan. So like, we didn't actually have plans to train people. Like we just kind of said, here, just show them what we do and teach them to do that. Secondly, we definitely underestimated like how well things would go like economically. But like part of that was thinking that like they just wouldn't defect to the Taliban because America's so great. What the Taliban had going for them is like, they're more relatable. They just are. They look more like the citizens of that country than U.S. soldiers do. And secondly, they were able to offer things like, hey, we'll give you jobs, we'll give you like housing and money, which the U.S. government was not doing. And that is a huge, huge problem. I guess that kind of congeals with my last point. It's just like we could have actually offered them a livelihood, a way out of their poverty. Instead, we just said, hey, you should fight for us because these people are attacking you. And, that's what you clearly want.
And how do you see that working?
Well,
what?
Yeah, give
How
him
do you see
jobs.
that working?
Level one.
No, I could address this from a detailed. Yeah, I could address this from a detailed perspective.
No, I get that you can see that it's not. I asked you a very pointed question. How do you see it being able to work?
CTV, can I answer Maddie? Because I was kind of waiting for like 4 minutes. So okay, so basically, Maddie asked me what could we do in order to like have held people more accountable, make sure that training was actually being conducted, make sure that the money didn't end up in the pockets of kleptocratic warlords and all that kind of stuff. So what I would say is we tried, and what ended up happening was people were more willing to get into a gunfight with us than they were willing to follow the standards that we were setting. There's documented cases of American military service members calling out, for instance, like the Chai boys, like the T boys, the pedophilic abuse of like local villagers by Afghan security forces. Basically, what the military was ultimately told by our chain of command, and what we were told by the Afghans, was that this is just the local culture. You got to deal with it. These people are our allies. Don't worry about it. So that was like number one. We were basically told to shut up about our complaining. Number two. When it came to why did we do the training weird? Well, I joked about this with my friends because my friends were still going over to Afghanistan over the past decade because they stayed in while I got out. It really felt like most years for the past decade, there was a higher chance of an Afghan national cop or a Afghan National Army soldier turning around and killing you than there was of the Taliban. The Taliban basically knew to hide in the shadows and wait for it, whereas basically you could literally just Google like Afghan National Police shoots American soldier, Afghan National Army shoots soldier, and literally just check out the dozens upon dozens of articles where somebody's just like, fuck it, I don't like Americans, pop, 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 and they literally shoot them in the back. So what happened was, from a training standpoint, I would say probably very initially in the war, we did think of these people as our allies. We did think of these people as the people who are going to take over for us. We did think of these people in that kind of way. But as the situation deteriorated, we saw within the government, we saw that we actually literally tried to provide all the material and logistical support that we could, and it would vanish into thin air. Eventually, even Americans were like, fuck it. And that's one of the things, if you watch like a documentary is like, this is what winning looks like. I think it's by Vice. It might even be from like 2012 or 2013 or something like that. Even they're talking about how American soldiers and American airmen on the ground know that this shit is going to collapse the second that we fucking leave. But the generals and the politicians show up, take a photo op, shake hands with the local leader, and then get back on the helicopter and fly away, patting themselves on the back about how well they're doing. So this is the thing. Like, if it sounds like I'm pissed off, but I'm agreeing, it's because, like, if you were talking to soldiers or if you were talking to Marines or airmen who were on the ground who interacted with people, we would have told you this shit back in 2010, 2011, like even before Osama bin Laden was killed. We would have told you Afghanistan is going to collapse into inter-ethnic, inter-religious, and interlinguistic warfare the second.
Okay.
So I think
I just want to say quickly,
just so I can-
Connor, you've been cutting out in and out a little bit, but we heard everything you said. You've just been cutting out in and out. So check your mic. All right. Go ahead, Maddie.
Yeah, guess my question too, because like again, I pose this to you because I know that you like were there and had friends who deployed there. Would you say like you said like from 2010 onward, it was clear to service members that it was just going to descend into chaos or whatever, things were fall, and that the U.S. military was keeping it together. Is that a sentiment that was like widely shared with the Afghan people, or is it something where like the U.S. clearly saw that like the people there on the ground saw the writing on the wall? Like, is that why maybe there was even like among your partners over there in Afghanistan, there was like not as much of a sense of urgency or a sense of like conviction to actually like establish a working military or solid like government footing? I just wonder if like
Yeah.
yeah.
No, 100%. And here's the thing is, so we're talking about probably like three major ethnic, well, actually it's like five major ethnic groups. But like the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, and all the people who make up the Northern Alliance. I think the Hazaras or something like that, who are like the Iranian-based people who speak Farsi. Somebody should check my ethnic groups. And then the Pashtun, if I'm using it correctly, I think Pashto is the language, Pashtun is the people. So you're talking about like three major groups: the Northern Alliance, the Hazaras, and the Pashtun. And what's interesting about like Hamid Karzai in particular was he was like a descendant of an administrator for the king who was Pashtun, but was popular with the Northern Alliance and the Hazaras. That's why he was picked in order to leave the country. But when he left, you basically only had representatives who were only representative of like single demographic groups, and you had competent units within each ethnic and linguistic group who were competent by themselves, but they themselves were like regional powers. So if you took a regional power, so for instance, if you took like a Northern Alliance unit that was Uzbek or Tajik or something like that, and they spoke a different language, and then you brought them into the South, they would be treated as bad as foreigners, as American forces, and they would be killed. And oftentimes they would be as mean and cruel to the locals as they were back in their own regional group, because they were basically fish out of water. And then same thing, if you took like a competent Pashtun force and put it in the North, then you would have a similar problem. So that's kind of where America ultimately just conceded to kind of like the kleptocracy, the gang warfare, the tribalism within Afghanistan, because it seemed so deeply rooted that we weren't going to be able to overcome it. So yeah, we realized these things probably a decade ago, but the vision of a united democratic Afghanistan was too appealing to the people who were selling the ideal for them to back down off of.
Okay, that is so much better than when I thought you were just trying to say Afghanistan bad. So I'm going to say I'm sorry. You've definitely done at least as much prep on this as I have. Plus, you've been there, so you probably do know a lot more about this than I do.
Minor correction: I've been to Iraq, not to Afghanistan, but I'm a history nerd, so I read a lot of this stuff. But basically, like, yeah, it's not. God damn it! Like, unfortunately, it's not like a moral judgment. It's more of like a pragmatic reality versus the idealism of the outsider. And there's also like a whole bunch of like cultural shit that I could get into. It was mentioned in a book. It's like part of the Pashtunwali code, which is like it's like a tribal code or something like that, which is like me and my brother against my cousin, me, my brother, and my cousin against the next village, me and the next village against the whoever, and then all of us against the outsider. And it's basically just like this. It's kind of like a natural tribalistic code that really anybody could articulate from any culture. But it's ingrained in there where basically it's like we have to have a system of loyalty that's based off of proximity, not based off of these like highfalutin fucking ideas like democracy or capitalism or some shit. It just doesn't fly over there.
But it's also a thing in biology too. It's actually biological that animals feel that in all social species.
Not surprised, but I need to get some water, so I'll be right back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so back to the question that I asked Ninetales, right? Which is, how do you see it actually working?
Building a competent military?
See what working?
Am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
No, you're good.
Okay. So do you mean military building?
No, nation building. How do you see that actually working?
I'm talking about giving them aid. I don't think we should go there to nation build.
Well, if we're giving them aid, essentially that's what nation building is, right?
No. There's a
Yes,
difference.
yes,
there's a-
yes,
no,
yes.
Let me
Hold on,
answer.
no, no,
You asked me a
stop.
question. Let me
Understand
answer.
where I'm coming from
Ask me a
before you
question.
then
You asked-
understand where I'm coming from.
No, I do, I
Whenever
do.
you're disagreeing with what I just said, so either A, give me the chance to explain so you understand where I'm
You
coming
cut me
from.
off to explain. Let me answer
Yeah,
first.
because you said no.
You
right?
didn't even know if we
Clearly
disagree or
there's-
not.
Okay. Oh, so
Jesus.
hold on. CTV has been waiting for a long time, so let's go CTV. Finish your point, and then Ninetales can respond.
If you're planning on giving them aid, essentially what you're trying to do there is prop up the nation, right? Because there's a government that is going to be getting the money, right? So no matter how you look at it, whether it's military occupation or foreign aid, right, by giving them money, you are in fact participating in nation building because the rest of the world, right, because the evolution of ideas went from tribes to then nations, right, and then nations have borders. So this is how the world has evolved to get us to where we are now. So if we're going into a place like Afghanistan, right, and the people there want to get the help that they need to be able to accomplish a goal, what is the right way to go about doing that?
Yeah.
Because you can't just give them money.
So there's a huge difference between giving them money and giving them conditional money. So my suggestion is we give this money to a third-party country, a neutral country that isn't going to take advantage of the power that giving aid to another country inherently gives a certain country. The difference compared to what we do now is I don't think the U.S. should be able to say, here's a bunch, unless it's like we're talking to the Taliban about their ideological issues. That is like something that needs to be done for the sake of human rights. But outside of that, I don't think the U.S. needs their global hegemony as badly as they pretend they do.
What if the third country acts like America? Why is America?
Well, then we shouldn't be using them.
Bad?
Like that's not ideal. And yeah, like that would be
the
a
reality
problem.
of but the reality of the situation that you're talking about there, Ninetales, right, is that anytime that you give someone another nation or another group or whatever it is, the power to decide those things, you're then taking the power from here and you're just shifting it to here, right?
But
so you didn't actually solve the problem
like
there.
America. Like I'm talking about a place that is like a country that has tried nation building, failed horrifically, and then is now trying to give them aid again. I don't want that. I want it to go to a country that just doesn't do nation building, like literally, like Switzerland. Like it's not hard.
Switzerland.
So if that's a bad example, then like okay, so for every bad example I can create, like I just want proof that there are no good examples, that there were no countries that we could ever trust as a third party form of escrow.
Well, why can't they do it? Like, why can't the people whose country we're fixing do it?
U.S.
No, Afghanistan.
Oh well, that's a different discussion entirely. Holy shit! If you want to go down that road, I'm happy to.
So
I mean,
Yeah.
Like economic sustainability
so then we'll
where we're not at, and that's why they need aid. So if you want to talk about getting over the hump, yeah, I think they would probably prefer to.
So I do want to. So CTV, finish your point. I do want to ask a question. I want to get something out of all of you, an opinion. So, but finish your point, CTV.
Well, at the root of all of it, right? We're back to the only way for the United States to meaningfully participate around the world is for other nations to join as a state of our union. Otherwise, you don't get the kind of results that you want there because those people do not have the same OSHA protection as far as workers' rights are concerned. They don't have the same protections for women, right? Like everything that you would want to be able to accomplish in another nation is essentially you copying what it is that we've enshrined in the federal government and putting it somewhere else. So what's your hesitation to states becoming a part of the union?
States becoming a part of the union? Where did unions come into this?
My
issue
states. Would be logistics. That would be
my issue would be lots of things. But anyway,
with the world's largest navy.
Domestic flight. No one can do that.
Oh, there you go. That's actually a good one. But to CTV, I wanted to say something before when you brought this up. I have lots of thoughts on this issue that you're bringing up. We've talked about this before, but one of the reasons why we don't bring in random countries as states is because of the population. For all our states, we have not entered them in, right? We've not accepted them until they've had a certain level of white individuals there, right? Like unless it reaches a bar, and like whites are in the majority, honestly, then we won't consider acceptance. We didn't want to let in Hawaii until we had enough white people there, right? And we kind of
Is that true of the Philippines? I don't think it is.
Well, they're not.
No, I mean
Philippines
the
are a
Philippines. I
state.
don't. Yeah, but Philippines is not a state, and I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, it was a territory like any of the other territories.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, but
territory.
he's talking about state
I just
law.
meant state, not territory. Not territory.
But Prime, we don't have enough white people. We're only having 2 kids at a time, so we can't add any more states.
So it's I don't know. I think that's kind of nice to just blame it on a boogeyman racism, but the
Well,
reality is that if you want,
I'm not trying to blame it on boogeyman racism. I'm saying this is literally our pattern, right? And I think it was actually enshrined into law at one point. Don't quote me on that last part. Don't quote me on the last part. But there's a book about exactly this, talking about like the history of letting territories in, and how we've managed territories in the past. Like there's a whole racial aspect to this.
Again, you're pointing it to the past as a racial boogeyman instead of addressing the here and now,
Why
which
wouldn't
is
they let people? Okay, hold on. The Muslim boogeyman, let's say you actually put this up for a vote, right? You actually poll people as to why they wouldn't let Afghanis in, right? Like, can you guess? Like, what would be like? Oh, maybe an idea of what would be at the top of that list of reasons why.
So
they
then
wouldn't let
how do you
Afghanis-
get people past that?
I don't
dismantle
know.
white supremacy. I don't know, right? There's lots of
No,
lots of
not
things.
this. It's simply about having conversations about what the benefits are, and then helping people understand what the current framework of the federal government actually is. Like repealing the 17th Amendment would be a good way to start, as far as getting us back to the original framework system that we had, right?
Yeah.
Because what we need is the state legislatures to be involved with the federal Congress, right? Which they're not currently. It's all direct vote, so we end up with basically two House of Representatives. Is what we end up with, right? So, like, the American people, one, don't understand their own fucking federal government well enough to be able to participate in it, if I'm being honest, right? And then two, because they don't understand, that gives justification for all these other dumbass ideas that they might have as to why it is that they would hold themselves back whenever they would want the type of aid in other countries, to where you don't end up in situations like we're in. But at the same time, there's no other way to be able to do it and allow private business to be able to go in there at the same time to help deliver a lot of the things that people would want anyway.
Okay.
Yo,
so I
CTV is right.
Oh boy. I want
Everybody. No, everybody earlier was talking about, we give money to these NGOs and we can't track them. That's because we don't control the tax policy and everything else inside of Haiti. So if we just made the mistake, hey.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, so do we want Afghanistan to make a democratic fucking vote on whether or not they want to become the 51st state? Is that where we landed?
Well, they don't have their own country anymore.
The problem with that is that then they get all the rights and everything that we have.
can't
too.
unite them as a nation, but they'll definitely want.
Yeah, like hold on, we literally cannot get Puerto Rico in as a new territory, right? Like we literally don't want Puerto Rico. We don't want fucking Washington D.C.
Yeah, but we don't grow. But we don't
Because
grow
a large
poppies or
number of the-
heroin in Puerto Rico.
That's
Listen,
because a large number of
honestly,
the
Gabe said
actual
that.
workers that were in Puerto Rico were Republican, and they all moved to Florida.
Okay, number one,
sorry,
not enough whites.
I do want
I mean,
to.
after the last hurricane, they all said, "Fuck it, Puerto Rico sucks. I'm going to Florida."
Okay, all right. Oh wow, moved to Florida.
Yes, that is
they were
why.
that
is why they relocated to Florida,
Yeah.
because they're like,
Not because they were
There's a lot
fast.
more
Yeah.
economic
I mean,
opportunity.
revolution.
Yeah, I mean,
this party's fucking dead.
there's
I'm out of
good
here.
jobs out here, right?
No, that is not why.
That is exactly
So-
why. I know fucking 10 Puerto Ricans in my community. Don't fucking tell me that's not why.
Oh, you
boy.
have
I
to
fucking
emphasize
asked
the 10
them.
Puerto Ricans, okay?
Okay. As,
Jesus.
CTV.
He's
You ever
got-
heard of a quantitative analysis?
Oh,
Have you ever heard of a Boricua?
okay, all right. Okay, great. I do want to actually. Oh man. Oh man. I do want to actually ask you the question. It was in the it was in the prompts, but I want to get a solid answer for all of you, right? Get you on the record, right? So people can clip it and use it against you at a later date. So should
Hell no. I don't know the question. Don't clip that.
should
We attack Canada.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have to ask you that. The answer should be yes, and if not, get the fuck out. Anyway,
Well, we've had this discussion. You guys are two pussies when it comes to the cold.
Okay, we have Alaska. Anyway, moving on. So,
what do you think we're changing the climate for? What do you think we're changing the climate for?
Yeah, but like your Alaskan population is so small, you don't have a chance.
So, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, but think of all the polar bears.
All right, I want to know from all of you. I'm going to go down around, right? Should the U.S. recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government of Afghanistan? All right, everyone's got to answer. Starting with you, GSU.
Yeah, so as I said in the opening, I think we should look at how they treat all humans, and we should make a decision from that. I have no problem with us like recognizing them and trying to form diplomacy. I think right now the only thing we can do is hope for diplomacy, or either like I think it's best interest of national security, no matter how like dire it looks.
Okay. CTV.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, like not only no, but hell fucking no, right? Fuck the Taliban, right? That's just where I'm at with it. You don't get to just because you ran off the other government, then come in and like, oh, we're occupying this line now, or this land now, so recognize us on the international stage. It doesn't work that way. Fuck you.
Wait, we did that, right?
Counterpoints.
Hello, I didn't hear a declaration of independence from the fucking Taliban before you start making a dumbass analogy like that.
I know.
So if they do give one, is it fine? If they make a declaration,
yeah,
of
if they do give one.
Hello, there's no way possible for that to happen.
Yeah,
right? One, they don't have a history of fucking problems with taxes against the British, right?
And they don't have the French.
It's a whole different situation. The Middle East has been fucking occupied for how long, right? Since before the days of Alexander, when he went through there and kicked the shit out of everybody, right?
Well,
The
so
native people there might disagree.
Answer the question.
Yeah. And thank you, Trance Extreme, for that donation. Very much appreciated. Go ahead. Counterpoints.
What GSU said, not yet, and absolutely situation dependent. If they're being dicks and assholes and they're supporting terrorists, absolutely fucking not. If they get their shit together and actually try to build an actual democratic coalition government, then I'm open.
Okay. All right. I really wanted to explore this, but all right, let's go to Maddy.
Hold on, wait, Prime. Can I ask? So me and Counter just found common ground. I just want to call it out.
We agree with each other all the fucking time.
Yeah. I mean, you're a crypto Republican, so of course you. All right, I'm moving on.
Crypto Republican. Okay.
So, Maddy.
Oh, I hate that a lot. But yeah, sorry, was the question, would I, if I were like the United States government, recognize or like
should we do it?
Accept some sort of diplomatic ties with the Taliban?
Should we recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government?
No, not right. Not immediately. I think because this situation, I mean, God, in the span of a week, all this shit has happened. So this is a constantly evolving situation to begin with. And I think, I mean, granted, you could say it's hypocritical given that we have diplomatic relations with plenty of other like oppressive, horrible regimes, but I don't know that I would right off the bat.
Okay.
I just think that's problematic.
Maddy. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Ninetales.
Yeah.
So yeah, mostly the same thing that's been said so far. It's too soon to tell. We really have to see what the Taliban's going to do with this power. As I've been saying, we might be able to actually expect them to try to act decent on a world stage because they do want global recognition. They've said that outright, and I think that makes sense with what they've been doing. On the other hand, we're not trying to like give Afghanistan a better democracy. We're not, and that's nation building. So I don't even want that. And we're not even competent with like making their military better, which probably we should do before we try to install a new puppet government. So like all signs point to no, in my opinion.
T-Trump?
Yeah, I would agree with essentially the sentiment that most of us have expressed, that right now they seem like just any other terrorist organization, but if they do like a full 360 and become super kind and nice to everybody and like us just to Sweden, then sure, of course we should, but it seems like that's incredibly unrealistic and they're most likely just going to be a terrorist organization like Saudi Arabia.
Okay, I definitely want to explore this. All right, so Revolt Rise.
Yes, we should absolutely deal with the Taliban as the legitimate and rightful government of the state of Afghanistan, whatever it's going to be called, and we should do it as soon as possible because China already is, and like if we want to have any influence in the place, we might as well like try. Like,
yeah,
Should we though? Like we can't even leave without killing people.
I mean, yeah, that's great. That's why we should leave.
So
we can't do anything without killing people.
You said we should leave. Okay, I thought you said should we?
So okay, I want to respond to this, and well, I don't know about the timing, the exact timing, but to say that we can't recognize them as the rightful government, that seems odd to me, because one, if you actually care about helping the Afghani women, right, that we always make believe that we give a shit about, but if we actually do, then we'd like the best way to do that right now is to provide them with economic opportunities, right, to actually engage with Afghanistan, and like try to like build industry, right, try to maybe shift the government with like sticks and carrots, right, and you can't do that if you don't acknowledge them. If you just don't acknowledge them at all, then you can't do that. And then to say that we have to wait till they change, but they're not going to, right?
Right.
And let's not pretend it's a prerequisite for the U.S. for any other fucking government, right? So like we already know this, and T-Jump brought up Saudi Arabia. Okay, so if we can work with them, and they are fucking horrible human beings. Like the Saudi leadership is fucking horrible human beings. If we can work with the Saudi government, then we can work with the Taliban. We're working with them before. We're not like we weren't.
We're working with them in
They're
Syria.
like a new government, right? A brand new force that we have no experience with. We were working with them. They were the legitimate government before we decided to knock them over. We had relations with them, and so now they're backed.
Well,
and it's
that
not. And
was
it
when
feels
the
like.
USSR was involved.
And it,
so
yeah,
like,
but that's the problem.
It
we
feels
like
like
them.
it feels like
a good
honestly,
government and we put them in.
It feels like it feels like
So now they're shooting us with the guns
sour
we gave
grapes.
them because we both were like, boo, at USSR, hate you.
It feels like we're saying we're pissed, right? We're sad because we fucking lost. It was a humiliating defeat. We lost, and now we're taking our ball and going home. But those Afghani women, which we will never pretend, like we'll never stop pretending that we care about. We'll never stop showing pictures of them suffering, right? For content online on cable news. But if we actually give a shit about them, okay, let's engage with this government and try to shift them that way. If there's any way that's going to happen, if there's any hope of us influencing this, then it's by an honest engagement with our enemy. Oh, I guess I went.
Everybody agrees.
I mean, yeah,
Right.
like, but here's the thing. If we don't recognize them, what does that lead to? It leads to sanctions, right? Like what does sanctions lead to? Like it's like we're going to be expanding the economic misery that they're feeling for longer. For what reason? For what reason? For what goal? Like what does it achieve for us to not?
Dude, but all you're really
Hold
going
on.
to do is just encourage other fucking peoples or groups around the world to go take over another legitimate government. Like, well, if you want to get on the world stage, all you gotta do is go take over somewhere.
that I
What's the
think is
definition of legitimate government?
I have. Like if there was, for example, in Myanmar right now, where they are still in the midst of a military coup.
Yes, that the CIA
are you
funded the
saying
group
that
that
as-
took the power.
Right. No,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that like in that situation or in any other situation, where maybe there's like military overthrowing of a democratically elected government. Are we going to be, is this indicating essentially that we are going to be so quick to just simply shift to now seeing this like oppressive invading force as our allies? Like, are our diplomatic relations that fickle?
I think that we need to acknowledge, like, first and foremost, that like the reason why that military junta had the wherewithal and the power and the equipment to do what they did is because we funded them for years and years and years after we left Vietnam. That's a huge portion of it. And the second part of this is that like it's none of our fucking business. Like that's their business in their country. And if we get
Yeah.
involved, it will only get worse.
So like, would you?
No.
Is there any line you draw if there were like humanitarian, like if they're like
I mean,
murdering,
yeah, of course. Would I stop Hitler?
murdering
Of course.
toddlers, right? Like,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
if it's like some sort of warlord, like that
Sure.
takes over via like extremely violent means? Is there a line, or is it like no?
It's-
But if we don't do it, then then China's going to do it. So we're going to push everything else aside and just
I would love
normalize
China.
relations.
Let China do it. Let China do it, and like let China fix Afghanistan too. Like right now, like one of the things that nobody's talked about yet tonight is the fact that there's 35,000 Uyghur Muslims from Xinjiang, China, that are fighting with the Taliban against the United States right now. Like that's another problem.
Indiscriminate diplomacy just based on who's.
I'm saying that like the world like that's a bad situation. Like when you have a military junta take over and like throw out a democratically elected like government, how does bombing them make it better?
It's not junta, it's junta. All right,
I don't
it's
see it as
killing
a
me.
either or,
But let's go to counterpoints. We have a limited amount of time.
Yeah, so basically what I would say is sanctions are not what they were in the 90s. So I forget what kind of sanctions. There's actually a name for them, the kind that we're doing on Russia right now for their oligarchs very specifically.
The Magnitsky ones?
Yeah, can you pronounce that again for me?
Magnitsky?
Yeah, Magnitsky. I was literally trying to Google the term for the past 20 minutes. Where you can do targeted attacks against individuals for their individual like international economic holdings, and so that's where I would say we don't have to starve the Afghan economy. We could actually do a lot of things in order to prop up the Afghan economy while simultaneously trying to bring to heel the leaders of these governments through those kinds of sanctions. So we're not playing in the same ballpark that we were 20 or 30 years ago.
I do like the Magnitsky sanctions model because that, like Counterpoints mentioned, like when you apply sanctions to an entire country, it's usually the just civilian population that suffers the most because that their economy takes a massive hit. But those who are in power and are like the ruling elites of those countries still are fine in many cases because they have most of their money offshore anyway. But something like that targets their specific wealth and influence is far more effective.
Oh, we can tie the two subjects together. You can do Magnitsky sanctions against international NGOs that are just fucking pillaging money. You can also do it against corrupt government officials, who ransack the budgets of the foreign aid that's being sent. We can freeze all their assets, and after we freeze all their assets, we can redistribute it for foreign aid.
And maybe we can finally get Academy or Blackwater to be accountable for goddamn something.
Back it up, folks.
That's not going to happen.
Our job is done.
Well, CTV asked us to solve foreign policy at the start, and our buddy Counterpoints actually made it happen. All right, see?
We need to send Counterpoints to Israel, and he can just fix that situation right up.
You
actually put that on for next week. I put that on for next week. I already solved it.
By the way, I just want to point out that first of all, none of us talked about how this all started because we just didn't want the Russians to be able to hang out with the Afghans, or at least that's what happened.
All
halfway
those
through.
beautiful pictures you see of women wearing skirts and like dressed in Western style, that was all communist Afghanistan. Okay, like that was all the good times were communist.
But also, like I worry that in any instance, like, if we don't recognize them nationally, that gives them a reason to be protectionist, and it's literally going to enable them to be dictators. So, like, I feel like if we don't want Afghanistan to be a dictatorship, we kind of need to say, like, okay, you get to be recognized, but we don't want this, so you better keep that in mind and behave.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, they're going to be a dictatorship even if we recognize them. Like, why would recognizing them make any difference at all?
No. If they're motivated, if they have reasons to be protectionists, the main one being the world does not accept their legitimacy, that's going to push them into authoritarianism and thus become a dictatorship. You can't essentialize them. You can't essentialize them and say they already are what they are. Okay, politics aren't that simple.
At the same time, though, you would have me believe that somehow they're going to be different than what they have been.
Well, we're saying if you want the potential for them,
Fields arguments, you're like saying, "Oh, well, they have the ability to, right?"
Well, to be fair, when we left Vietnam, that kind of happened. Like their government was not nearly as terrible as we like.
What I'm saying is, like, if you want to have the potential for them not to be a dictatorship, there's more potential when we recognize them as a legitimate government than when they feel more threatened.
What is a legitimate government? Like, I mean, like this is like the Taliban right now just won a war, right? And so they have the control of the country. Like, what else do you want to make a government legitimate?
Are we talking
Representation.
philosophically or politically? Because
I'm just trying to understand how anybody could have a like anybody who's objecting to us recognizing them. Like, what else do you want from them?
They had a
Representation.
Not be
revolution and they
terrorists.
won, right?
not to be
Well, okay,
terrorists.
I want to.
The U.S. is terrorist.
Nah, okay.
Yeah, they are.
Nine Tails, we were
they never
doing so
terrorists.
well tonight. We did
But
so
the
bad,
U.S.
and then we
never
were doing
terrorizes
so well.
anybody. The
Yeah,
U.S.
and
never
hold on,
terrorizes
hold on,
other
wait,
nations.
right? I just want to point this out real
Let's
quick.
let
The
Nine
very
Tails
first
get
thing the
our
Taliban is doing is
thoughts,
taking all
please.
the guns.
Capitalism is bad. Go ahead, do it.
Okay, so
I interrupted
all right.
Connor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So what I was going to say was the basically legitimacy. I think what we're all looking for is some level of representation. As we were already talking about, there was like
Right.
five different linguistic groups, like probably half a dozen to a dozen different ethnic groups. And basically what we would expect is that they would just bully everybody, kill everybody, anybody who doesn't like it, they would just execute. If they actually wanted a sense of legitimacy, then they would bring those people into some kind of democratic framework and allow them to have some say in the way that they govern themselves. That's how you earn legitimacy, through consent of the governed.
I mean, so you're saying all like theocracies and all monarchies that currently exist, we are no longer recognizing as legitimate government. Like, so Saudi Arabia out, like Jordan out.
Are we talking about practically or philosophically?
I'm talking about like, why are you not going to recognize that the Taliban is a legitimate government in this situation? They have
Probably.
majority of, they have the monopoly of power, right? They have the monopoly of control of the land, and they just won a war to have the property. Like, what else do you want?
Well, probably the reason why I think everybody, including the mainstream, would hesitate to grant them that legitimacy offhand is because they were the hosts of Al Qaeda. They were allied with Al Qaeda and ISIS. Therefore, despite them being like a regional power and not an international terrorist organization, they sure don't have fucking problems rubbing elbows with a bunch of fucking jihadist assholes.
But we installed them in the first place, and we've also been working with
I would like your historical citation for we installed the Taliban.
Sure. I mean, like, we can work backwards, but go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying we didn't install the Taliban. I think that's historically incorrect.
So if this were like, I don't know, 1938, would you recognize Nazi Germany as a legitimate government and have diplomatic ties?
I mean, they won.
I mean,
they won a war.
We did. Yeah, we did.
But my question is, should we have, now knowing what we know now, knowing the atrocities that happened? Would you argue for
recognizing that they're the
recognizing
controlling
that
power
government?
of the land?
At the end of the day, that like there's no, they were the legitimate government of the thing. Like, whether they were a legitimate government in like my philosophical like terms, I agree with, but they had the monopoly of power and control of the area. That makes them the government.
Yeah, exactly.
So you would still like have open diplomatic ties?
I mean, this is a very, very different thing between like Nazi Germany, which was like a major force and like a major economy, and it represented a huge portion of Europe, and Afghanistan, which is Afghanistan, and like I think that they're hugely different. Now, would I have ties with them? Probably not, because the reason why that we weren't supposed to have ties with them in the first place, and we did have major ties with them, because they had all these sanctions put on them after World War I. They weren't allowed to they weren't allowed to have like steel industry. They weren't allowed to have build up their military in any way. And so the United States capitalists had to sneak around those laws and funnel them billions of dollars and all the resources that they needed in order to build the Wehrmacht in the
why not do we recognize? I mean, then why not recognize Korea as like a legitimate government and open thing, right? Like, where do we draw the line?
If you don't like somebody, like, just because you don't like somebody isn't a very good reason to to necessarily diplomatically.
I think that's the best reason to not recognize somebody.
Wait. Calling them an official controlling authority, aka a government, and advocating for diplomatic ties with them are two different things. I feel like you're lumping those into one.
So I feel like just the whole thing where it's like, oh, but would you recognize? I don't know that necessarily is important, because whether or not we recognize them, they're going to still have control over the country. That has no actual bearing on their power and influence in that region. Like, because whether we or not we formally recognize, I bring it to like diplomatic ties, because that is really what makes it where, like, if we want any form of influence or like Revolt was saying, to prevent China from swooping in and doing that. So that's why I bring up this question where it's like, recognizing or not, like, fucking sure.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question.
Would we, yeah, go for it.
Do you think they'll treat the allies that were allies with America better if we do, or do you think they would treat them worse if we don't? Like
I genuinely don't know, and I think a lot of that would depend, I would imagine, on their sense of self-preservation. So if one of the allies that had historically been partnering with the United States against them, if that country was somehow in a position to generate a lot of like wealth or economic development for them, or whatever source it is that maybe they would like to have or influence, whatever, I think they would show plenty of flexibility in that, whether or not that relationship's impacted by how the United States interacts with them.
but they've killed women in positions
of
power, right? That were economically doing well for them, right? Like,
yeah, but that doesn't, like, in their mind, I would say that the way they deal in terms of domestic with individual citizens, they don't not seem to demonstrate the same kind of like large scale sense of economic impact on like those individual decisions than they would do on in terms of like at a more macro level, like nation, like partnerships or whatever you want to paint that as. I just think they're two different things. And again, like, both, I would say, deal with the Taliban trying to consolidate power, because at the end of the day, the reason they're like murdering women and trying to limit the activities and economic power that women have within that country, and just like everything about women, is because they want, like, it's all about consolidating their power and controlling. And I would say that being the shepherds of specific like economic policy or an influx of resources would serve to further that power consolidation.